Okay, good evening, everyone. Sorry we were a little late from closed session. We do have nothing to report from closed session. So with that, I will bring to order the joint meeting of the Cotati City Council and the successor agency to the former Cotati Community Redevelopment Agency for this Tuesday, June 13th, 2017. May I please have a roll call?
I'll show Councilmember Skillen is absent. Councilmember Deloso?
Here.
Mayor Harvey?
Here.
Vice Mayor Landman?
Here.
Councilmember Moore?
Here.
Okay, with that, will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? So with that, we will move to the approval of the minutes and the notice of the waiving of reading of all resolutions and ordinances introduced and or adopted under this agenda.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to abstain from the meeting minutes for May 23rd.
Okay.
So moved.
Can we do them individually, since I'll have to abstain from
Okay.
special meeting?
So that's fine. We'll take them one at a time then. All right. So Cotati City Council regular meeting May 23rd. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. And, okay, so Lauren, we have one absent, one abstain, and three yes? Okay. Then we will move to the Cotati City Council special meeting May 30th.
So moved.
A motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Abstention?
Okay, and we have three yeses, one abstention, and one absent. Got that? Okay, all right. With that, we will move on to the announcements. The City of Cotati has special open office hours on Monday evenings from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. by appointment in the Community Development Department at City Hall as part of its Cotati Open for Business program. This program provides personalized assistance and information for developers, current Cotati business owners, and those interested in starting a new business within the city. The Rohnert Park Cotati Regional Library hosts events for all ages, including art exhibits, book clubs, and children's programs. All events are free and open to the public. For more information, call the library at 584-9121 or visit www.sonomalibrary.org. The Cotati Historical Museum is open regularly the second Tuesday of each month from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., Saturdays from 1 to 4, and by appointment. For more information, call 707-794-0305. Citizens interested in receiving City of Cotati community alerts via text or email are encouraged to sign up at Nixle.com. That is Nixle.com. The city offers a variety of recreational programs for all ages. See details on the web at cotaticity.org. And I also believe that, City Manager can correct me if I'm wrong, that this Saturday is the Jazz Festival. Okay, that's what I thought, noon to 6, correct? Okay. So with that, are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Mayor.
Okay, so then we will move on to citizens' business and public comment for consent calendar items. Any member of the public wishing to speak to the council on any items listed on the consent calendar or any matter not listed on the agenda that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council may do so at this time. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the council is not allowed to consider issues or take action on any item not listed on the agenda during this period. Pursuant to City Council Policy 2016-01, comments of any member of the public are normally restricted to a total of 3 minutes in length per person on matters not on the agenda, and a total of 3 minutes per person in length for any and all items on the consent calendar. The mayor may extend the time limit for a reasonable time where a disability accommodation has been requested. And so with that, let's see, Julie Dempsey.
Hello, Julie Dempsey. I am being considered tonight for ratification as the regional rep for the Sonoma County Regional Bike and Pedestrian Walkway. I just wanted a chance to introduce myself, say thank you for considering me. I'm really excited about helping the community and working towards bettering our city and our region, and I'm here and available for any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you.
No, any questions? Or
Not at this time.
okay, thanks.
Thank you. Let's see. I just want to be clear, Christopher, you want to speak on 9C? Is that, okay, we'll get to that. All right. Anyone else wishing to, yes, Lori?
I'm here in my pajamas to protest a 373-page agenda packet. No citizen in their right mind would, except that they're mad at Damien for his stupid replies he likes to send every day, would have any patience to read all of that. And it's going to cause the meeting to go past midnight. We all know that. And you won't probably do what you want and continue it past 10. We all know what you don't care about the citizens. This represents, I don't sleep with my teddy bear. It's Bella, my cat, who I should be snuggled with right now, instead of dealing with this. But I'm the most informed citizen by far. I know all the issues. I know all the details. And so that's why I'm here. I'd like to again ask for Mark Lamon's resignation from the council for conflicts of interest. He may not have financial ones, but he's broke the code of ethics many times. I keep finding more and more. Whenever I get mad at Damien, I go research and find more conflicts of interest of how he's connected to housing developers through Sonoma Clean Power. So that's my citizen's comment. Now I'd like to move on to the consent calendar. Okay. Everything other than the vesting tentative map extension is fine on the consent calendar for me. This tentative map you're trying to do is illegal. The one-time extension for one, they didn't qualify back in 2009. They missed the date by 1 month before, which would make sense because they were in the housing bubble when the tentative map went. Tentative maps cannot last more than 10 years. It's 2017. Tentative map was 2007. The environmental impact report was done in 2001. 2003, the tiger salamander became endangered. And now you're trying to say with the tentative map through all this that the environmental conditions do not change. They obviously changed because they became part of the federal and state critical habitat for the tiger salamander. So using the state to bypass the feds is what you're doing, and it's wrong. It's a development that will pave over. It's lots and lots of concrete. It'll pave right over the critical habitat. I mean, you look at the Sonoma Green Belt Alliance, and it shows that area is protected. You can't build on there. I don't know what you're getting, why you think you can. The other thing you've done is you've granted tentative extensions before illegally. There was one 24-month extension allowed for the failing economy. That was in like 2011, 2012. You've granted 3 more of those 24-month extensions illegally. There was only one. You've granted 4. This will be, I think, the 4th one. So you guys need to look into the legalities of that and just not pass it unanimously as you usually do. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. George?
Madam Mayor, it's Councilman George Berich. For the benefit of the audience, and especially our folks at home, my name is George Berich. I'm a former city councilman here in Cotati who served with honor and distinction. I was the one who exposed the racists and the crooks here at City Hall and the convicted money launderers, former Mayor John Gardino, Adrian Labbe, Michelle Berman, Linnell Hardy, Robin Birdfeather. I cooperated with the FPPC and brought those convictions to bear. Now, Mr. Moore, you had claimed at the last city council meeting that you never told me that you wanted to run me out of town, out of Cotati. Now, many times you have come to these meetings in years past drunk off your ass. I don't expect you, sir, to remember everything that you say and do when you come to these meetings totally inebriated. But I want to remind you that when you come to these meetings intoxicated, it is a crime. And that is being drunk in public, okay? And you've gotten away with it, but you owe this community an apology. And I don't expect you to remember these things, but I remember it as clear as day. You owe me an apology, and you owe the council an apology. Now, you Soviets here don't want and don't appreciate critical thinking because you're not mature enough, or you don't have the integrity to handle constructive criticism, and will even ask the police chief to handle these matters for you when you think people are out of line. Now, I've talked with a lot of people in the city of Cotati over the years, 20-some years now. Many tell me that they are simply afraid of the blowback from this council and this city hall if they dare to speak up and criticize this government. So, oftentimes they stay home, they live in disgust of what they see here and experience in Cotati, and how you have mismanaged this town. All you really seem to want, in my opinion over the years, is obedient taxpayers who want more government control over us from cradle to grave. Each one of you, I'm convinced at this point, are radical leftists. You have canceled planning commission meetings and design review meetings at an epidemic rate. The town is in steady decline. You applaud this notion of sanctuary cities, but you've never had the guts to bring that issue up to the agenda, that you support sanctuary cities and that you intend to do something about it. And the city police department right now has a standing order to not cooperate with ICE.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else wishing to speak citizens' business? Anyone else wishing to speak on the consent calendar? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the council.
Madam Mayor, if I might,
Yes?
briefly. Let's see, 3 things. First of all, for Ms. Dempsey, the good news is the Bicycle Commission is a lot easier than this, so it's all going to be good. I wanted to share that. Secondly, as to the comment during citizens' business about resignation and conflicts of interest, those are very serious allegations. So if you could bring that up again, I do want to speak briefly to it, as I should. First and foremost, this conspiracy theory regarding Sonoma Clean Power, that there are investors, banks, businesses, developers, and shadowy connections. I have to say that's patently false. Sonoma Clean Power has no private investors. None. Never has, never will. And being the most informed and knowing all the details, you should be well aware of that. Sonoma Clean Power is not like PG&E. There are no stockholders. Secondly, in terms of conflicts of interest, I would like the community to know this. I have none. I take my job for you very seriously, and I made sure of that. As I mentioned last time Ms. Alderman made this accusation, last year she took this complaint about conflicts to the FPPC. They investigated and said very clearly there were absolutely no conflicts in my professional conduct. This year, she once again brought a very similar complaint. The FPPC took one look at what was submitted and did not even investigate. They said there was nothing there no evidence to investigate. No evidence, insufficient evidence, and they didn't even open an investigation, Mr. Barrich. Looked like it took them about 2 days to turn that one around. So I'm just going to conclude by saying everybody's entitled to their own opinion, and you can like people or not like them for no reason. This is America, and you have a complete right to do that. But I do think that I would hope no one would want to try to damage another person's good reputation on false premises. I would think we all would want to agree with that. And lastly, are we to new agenda items, future agenda items?
Not yet.
Good, then I'll hold that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify for the record regarding the whistleblowing on money laundering and the fines levied against the participants, Linnell Hardy, Robin Birdfeather, Michelle Bergman, Adrian Laundrie. The $1,000 cash came from you, Mr. Barrich, under the strict prohibition of $350 per person per year.
I wasn't charged with anything, sir. You know it.
$15,000.
There was no charge and no crime, sir. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. How dare you?
$1,000, Mr. Barrich.
All right. Could we please have some order here?
We have order. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me, could we please have some order? Did you have a comment? Okay, and then
Okay, this is on consent.
okay.
Wait a minute. We're on citizens' business. See, I jumped ahead. I'll wait till consent, sorry. I'm going to wait till consent.
Okay, we're not there yet. Okay, we're not there yet.
And hopefully this will be an easy one. But for a future agenda item, something I did want to see if the council and staff would be willing to bring forward was bringing an item for us to look at our options for committing to the concepts of the Paris Climate Agreement. Now, I bring that forward only simply because I usually don't support things that are purely political, even if I truly support them. But in our case, in every city, actually in this county's case, with our participation in the Regional Climate Protection Authority, as well as our signing on to Climate Action 2020, we've essentially, I believe, met all the standards. And I will note that the town of Windsor, the city of Santa Rosa, I believe the city of Sonoma, and as of last night, unless they said no, Roanoke Park as well, and I believe Petaluma, have all already done this. And I just have to think we have to be able, as environmentally cutting edge as Roanoke Park. I think our community can do that. So I understand there's two directions. There's a statewide action to join, and I believe there's also a national mayor's response as well, and both might be appropriate, and I do believe both fit in. So I would hate for us to be the only city that was silent on this, seeing as we've already taken the action.
So, anything else for future agenda? No?
I would consider the sanctuary cities issue, but I know that then it would come back that we would just be more Soviet inclined. So I'll let that pass at this point.
Okay. All right, then we will move on to the consent calendar. You had a comment, but we also have someone that would like to speak on that. And
Hi, my name is Christopher Kren. I reside at 7833 Rivard Court in the Katati Village, or future Katati Village, or the cottages as it is now. I'm here on behalf of the Homeowners Association. I'm the president of our HOA. We have 46 homeowners that have all expressed that we would like to see the vested map extension continued. We'd like to see that completed at some point. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
thank you for your comments. So, did you?
I was going to ask to actually pull item A.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to ask to pull item C. So with that, then.
With that, I'll move for approval on the consent calendar for items. Oh, there's another person. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, quite all right. Good evening, council members and mayor. My name is Robin Miller. I'm the owner's representative for the property owner of the Cotati Village project, which is on consent item C.
And I'm going to pull that item.
I see.
So you can either speak now or you can wait for a couple minutes, whichever your pleasure.
I'm happy to wait.
Okay,
and
then I
address
will
that
make
at the
sure that
appropriate
you
time.
get called first.
Thank you.
Okay,
Anyone else?
so with that,
Well, with that, there's no other comments or hands up. I'd like to move to approve items B and D on the consent calendar.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Let that show 4-1. Okay, thank you.
Dive into item A.
So, yes, let's go with item A first.
So, with item A, which is the ratification of nominee for appointment of the countywide bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee, yes, Ms. Dempsey, I would like to now have you come up to the podium. And personally, I'd like to hear, your interests in wanting to be on this. I think, we'd love to hear that.
Oh, thank you. To be honest with you, I'm interested in getting involved in any way. It wasn't particularly just this advisory committee. I also applied for the Measure G as well. I'm just interested in getting more involved in our community as a whole. I am an ambassador to our area. I sell real estate, so I'm constantly bringing people in. As you know, we're always doing that. And I want to be more informed for my own self, as well as be able to inform our community members about what we have to offer. I've been a Sonoma County resident all my life, so I'm very comfortable with the whole regional idea of this. I love where we live, and I want to keep working towards keeping Sonoma County a destination.
Those were all the right things to say.
Oh, good.
I just want to throw that out there.
Thank you.
But I wanted to give you the opportunity, then we want to hear from you. I mean, when people apply to different boards and commissions, we have an application, we can read this, that only tells you so much. And it's always nice to hear from people what their interest is. So it's great that you want to be more involved with our community here, your community. So thank you for that, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ms. Dempsey, I just want to say thank you for stepping up to serve. It's great to get more involved in the community, and especially being an ambassador. It gives you a little insight into really what's happening locally and regionally. I think we're a pretty good council right now and working to recognize the regional relationship we have with our communities around us, and I think that's positive. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just echo my colleagues and say I think it's a perfect fit with the background. As a realtor, physically this community, and as a lifelong resident of the region, you know the area that way too. And I appreciate your willingness to serve and your interests, and glad that you're going to be on board for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I had the honor of meeting Julie at the Realtors meeting when I spoke there. And so that was the first time I met her. We had a very lovely conversation. And so I was very happy when you applied. I got the pleasure of speaking to both of the candidates. Interests a little bit different, but very interested in the city. Unfortunately, Beth kind of realized, that with having a very small child, that this was, not likely to work. So unfortunately, at this point in time, for the timing of this, that wasn't going to work for her. So I'm so happy that it will work for you and work with your schedule. And thank you so much for reaching out to me. I did speak to both candidates. And with that, that would be my recommendation for us to move forward with it. Oh.
I'd like to move to approve item A.
I would second that.
Okay, we have a motion.
A second.
Did you second? Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this before we vote? Okay. Seeing none, then we have motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Well,
Thank you very much.
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, let's see. Now we will move on to item C.
Yes, so Mayor, on item 9C, are you looking for a staff report, or are there just questions that you'd like to ask?
There seems to be a lot of questions surrounding this. I can kind of go through them, or unless you guys kind of wrote them down. Seems to be questions surrounding the tentative maps and that process. I heard the words illegal. I heard the words that we're bypassing laws, state and federal, that the property is not buildable. Let's see if there was any other, those were and the endangered species, and then that's the federal law versus the state law, and then that makes the property unbuildable. So if you could kind of touch those, I think that will address a lot of the concerns.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is John Paul Harris, for the record. I'm a planner with the City of Cotati. Let me first talk about the extensions. The Subdivision Map Act provides for numerous types of extensions for tentative maps before they move to the final map stage. We're tonight considering what's called a discretionary extension, and our code provides for a maximum one-year extension, and the Subdivision Map Act limits those extensions to a period of 6 years. So we're talking about the second one tonight. But let me also go back in time to 2009, 2007, when the map was first approved. It was approved, and the Subdivision Map Act allows that to be for 2 years. In 2008, as a result of the economic decline, the state legislature passed Senate Bill 1185, which automatically required no action on the subdivider's part and required no action on the city's part, automatically extended the life of the map for 1 year. That made the subject map tonight, which expired on June 13th, 2009, to expire on June 13th, 2010. Then, in 2009, Assembly Bill 333 came along, which automatically granted another 2-year extension. These are statutory extensions. They are written into the law of the Subdivision Map Act now. And then there was another extension, Assembly Bill 208, which also provided for a 2-year extension. And then Assembly Bill 116 came, which also provided for a 2-year extension. So currently, under those statutory extensions, only those statutory extensions, this map now has a life to June of 2016. One of the comments that was in Ms. Alderman's letter is that these are you only got like one shot, that these were not continuous. Well, the attachment that she included was informative, but it's not the statute. The statute is very clear that each one of these extensions are in addition to each extension before it, and in addition to any other extensions that may have been offered to an applicant. So in 2016, we came before this council and did a 1-year extension, which brought us to today, June 13th, 2017. And so here we are today. The applicant has been making progress on it. We're working with them to get through the design review. They've actually submitted for the final map. So we're hopeful that we can complete this process in this next year. But none of this is illegal, and it's completely within, what's normal. Before I move on, are there any questions about any of that? I will say, I submitted this, and it's now on the back and it's on the dais, but it kind of lays out the government code sections as well as where our pertinent dates.
There was also a mention of under no circumstances could a map last longer than 10 years.
There is a part of the code, as I mentioned, there are numerous types of extensions that can happen. One of the ways you can receive an extension, typically when people, they'll file a tentative map and they'll file a single final map. But sometimes people can, and the Subdivision Map Act allows for it, you can file multiple final maps. It's called phased final maps. When you submit a phased final map, when you submit one of those maps, you automatically get a 3-year, 36-month extension. Those series of extensions of final maps are limited to a 10-year period. So that is specific to that type of an extension. Other extensions have different timelines. So I think it was a misunderstanding of what that 10-year limit is. It's limited to those type of extensions that pertain only to final maps, phased final maps.
And what about the subdividing of the tentative map? And therefore, then it doesn't qualify for any extensions?
I don't understand that comment.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I don't.
All right. That's all my questions on that particular subject. Art?
I have a question on the tentative map extensions. Barring any new Assembly bill or Senate bills, how far out could this particular map be extended?
Well, each one of these is discretionary, but theoretically, it could go, we could do 6 of these 1-year extensions.
Okay.
So we've done one, and we're considering another one tonight, so theoretically, we could consider 4 more.
Thank you.
That helps.
It's a lot of extensions.
Yeah, well. Do you have any questions?
No questions.
No, ma'am.
Okay, JP, you want to move on to the next?
Yeah, so the next item was with respect to the environmental impacts on the site. This was thoroughly analyzed in 2001 when the EIS was put together. And at that time, they did identify impacts to wetland. There was impacts to Sebastopol meadow foam. And they also identified impacts to the California tiger salamander. So this was known, this was looked at, and it was mitigated at the time. And the site was graded in 2002, and all that wetland and those the Sebastopol meadow foam and the habitat for the salamander was destroyed. The mitigation was actually substantial, and I'll run through it just so that you understand that there was some mitigation. So part of what they did is they purchased 13.4 acres, which is called the Walker Avenue Conservation Site. They converted 3.5 of those acres into functional wetland. That area is managed by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and it's still functioning today. They also preserved another 3-acre site adjacent to the site that I just mentioned. That was specific for the Sebastopol meadow foam. And then they also purchased and then to address the California tiger salamander, they purchased an 8.8-acre site called the Archie property. That was transferred in fee title to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife in 2003, and they purchased 25.30 acres of mitigation credits. So the site has been fully mitigated. And I can answer any questions about that as well. You know, and also I also asked them to have a biologist go out last year to make sure none of the conditions had changed on the site since this had happened, and they have not. The site, as I said, was graded, and it's drained. So it's not creating the previous type of habitat.
And basically what you're saying is they, a long time ago, when the environmental impacts were found, they went ahead and upfront mitigated them.
That's correct.
A long time ago.
That's correct.
Okay. So, okay. So along those same lines, even though you're mitigating, and they've mitigated in many different ways, it doesn't mean that you can't build on a site, correct? Can you speak to that a little bit?
No, the mitigation, they did it so that they would have the opportunity to build on
Okay.
the site. That was why they completed the mitigation program.
So put another way, I guess, if they hadn't done the mitigation, then that might have made the site not able to be built on, if they didn't want to do that mitigation?
Well, certainly, if they refused to do
Right,
the
if they
mitigation,
refused
we
to.
would not, the project wouldn't be able to
Right.
move forward.
And then the federal government would come in and say, no, you
Right.
have to do this, or you can't build.
That's right. And, the state and the feds were involved through that whole process, and they approved all of these mitigation schemes, so that they, there was no question about whether or not there was going to be a conflict with federal or state law with respect to endangered species or special interest species at the time.
So what you're saying is that they actually have to sign off on whatever the mitigations are?
They did in this case, certainly,
Okay,
yes.
all right, okay. Yes?
So basically concerns about legality, buildability of the land, environmental impacts were all addressed and resolved over 15 years ago?
Those specific items, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. John, did you have any questions?
No, I think it's as clear as mud.
Okay. John, do you have any questions? No, okay. I will, since we pulled this, I'll open this back up for public comment, if you'd like to comment again, Lori.
I didn't know the cumulative effect, but there was one that they missed the date by a month. It was June 13th, 2009, and the bill was July 15th. So they missed an extension date. So that's one of the ones. The main thing you're not considering is that, yes, this was mitigated back in 2003 and all that. The federal plan for the critical habitat was not finalized until last year. It's a $50 million plan to preserve it. And you're still going on mitigation that is with the state, and you haven't involved, obviously, from the reports of the federal plan, you haven't shared them with the feds, because there's nothing in the plan about that area being why it would be put in the critical habitat of the tiger salamander when if it had been mitigated and everything, they wouldn't have put it in a protected area in the plan that was approved last year. So you need to really check it's not as clear as mud, or as John Moore said, it is an old environmental impact report. And there have been reports of tiger salamanders across the way to the federal wildlife service and they travel up to 1.8 miles to mate. And you're also within the 1.8 miles of the breeding ground. Those are all considerations that are in the federal plan that aren't being considered with this tentative map. And this is a plan. If you look at the plans, which heaven forbid I found, it's all cement. You're not considering that it possibly could have tiger salamanders under there. They're underground. They live in gopher holes and tunnels. They don't come out unless there's rain. Well, there wasn't rain a lot. So anyways, you really need to look into how the federal plan that was approved last year fits into all of this before the tentative map.
Thank you. Yes, George?
I'd like to bring up another point. I'd like to reiterate what I said in 2007 about this project tonight. The property in question is prime commercial property. It was zoned prime commercial property. The fact that residential development was even proposed for the first 43, 44 units out there was wrong. It was plain wrong. That was the jewel property of Cotati to bring in new tax revenue businesses to Cotati, and they put residential housing on commercial property. It was wrong. It was against the plan. They went against the general plan on this. And if you remember, one of the main arguments for building those townhouses, whatever you want to call them, homes, is that they were needed to house some of the employees at Lowe's department store. You remember? Remember all the talk about, well, the people need a place to live. Well, I've met a lot of those people in the Cotati cottages. I can't find anybody out there who works at Lowe's. Now, I could be wrong. If you know of anybody who lives out of the Cotati cottages that works at Lowe's, bring it up, because I couldn't find any. The whole project has been a farce from the beginning. Townhomes on some of the most productive, commercial productive property Cotati had left was squandered away for housing. Now, on an adjacent piece of property, you want to put another 40-some-odd homes there next to what will be probably a freeway in the next 20 years called Gravenstein Highway or Freeway. So this is wrong. It's wrong for Cotati. You people keep asking the community to come up with higher taxes, higher tax rates, when you should be looking at more businesses to generate tax revenue. And you've completely disregarded basic economics. The plan for commercial development out there was sound from the beginning, and it was deviated to satisfy a developer who could not, or said he could not, develop commercial property. Now we're in a housing bubble, which many experts say has a good chance of busting in the next year or two. And if it does do that out there, and they break ground, and they start building out there, and you're left with 44 frames out there of homes that he can't finish, you think Mr. Monahan is going to come back and finish those properties? I doubt it. I've met some of the people who work for him. He's not going to finish those projects if the economy and the housing goes bust. So this is terrible for Cotati.
Thank you for your comments. I believe that, Robin, you wanted to speak on this?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, my name's Robin Miller. For the record, I'm the owner representative for the ownership of the property, and we are asking for an extension on the vesting tenant map. As John Paul pointed out, we have made an application for site improvements, the final map, and design review of the 43 homes, as well as the 3 commercial buildings that are located directly on the frontage of Gravenstein Highway. Simultaneously, we have also applied for the Reds property, which is in need of probably some revamping, and we're trying to process that application as well. That application was submitted last year. We received comments in November, and now working through a number of the planned comments. We are planning to reapply, I'd say, this week or next for that project as well. We are very much trying to move all these projects forward as part of the original 50-acre master plan, which included the Lowe's, what's now known as the Newman Shopping Center site, which we don't control, as well as the cottages that were built alongside the Lowe's project and the now what we're calling the cottages itself. I know personally that we have gone out for financing, have letters of intent with various lenders, and are very eager to see this project get started as quickly as possible. So I think we've tried to make the steps to actually bring this project that was planned long ago to fruition, and with many delays, we're eager to try to complete what was begun way back when in 2007. So if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to try to answer them. If I have any further information I can provide, I'm available to you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Christopher, did you have something that you wanted to add again, since I opened this back up?
So I'm at 7833 Christopher Crenn. I'm an original owner. I bought my unit before they were built. So I bought into the entire master plan. And there's still a good amount of us, I think 33%, that are original owners. But our property's not finished. I mean, you come out and visit Ford Lane and it's rock on one side. It's supposed to be wider. You know, there's a lot of little pieces. We'd love to walk to Lowe's. We can't. I mean, we can crawl through the field if we want, or take a chance on 116. But, I mean, this is the feedback that we get from our homeowners. We can't even walk to Pete's or any of the coffee shops over there without taking risks on 116. So this, for us, we see this as a huge value for our community because we won't be an island anymore out there. There'll be others that we can interact with and actually get into town without, you know, using a car, use your bicycle and other stuff. So it's just, that was what I wanted to add. And we've been paying for the the salamanders for quite some time in our property taxes. So I think that's half my bill on my property tax is going towards that sanctuary for them. So they should be happy, I would think. But that's why we're here to support it, because we'd like to see a completion to the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? And I will close comment on it. So, JP, the missed extension date, my understanding is if they're in process, that they can continue, and that they were in process. They didn't actually miss it. They were processing an application to extend?
No, sorry.
Okay.
That's not quite right. What happened is Ms. Alderman is referring to, she's referring to the Assembly Bill 333. And I think it is forgetting the fact that there was Senate Bill 1185, which came before that, which extended the map 1 year. So it wasn't 1 month behind. It was actually 11 months into it, you know. So it was not a factor at that point because of that first one. Now, it was close for them. If that first one didn't come along, it would have been very close for them, but it had not expired.
And what about the new legislation that happened with the plan, and how does that impact that area being designated?
Well, what the federal government did, they were sued, and to declare what critical habitat, and it goes along with a conservation strategy to it's a recovery plan for the California tiger salamander. What was done in 2003 is consistent with that, even though the designation came later. The mitigation strategies that are part of the conservation plan were implemented when they did the mitigation for this project back in 2003. So there's no doubt that this was critical habitat area. Now, when they created the critical habitat, they do this in pretty large swaths. They don't go and say that parcel had a mitigation plan, so we're not going to include that one little parcel and create these islands. It's a pretty large area and actually covers most of the west side, all of the west side of Cotati, pretty much. But so it's consistent with that designation, and it honors it in terms of that requiring that mitigation.
Any other questions?
I did have one, but
Okay.
I have to thumb through, sorry.
Let's see, I think you hit most of my questions. I'll just go real quick, probably hitting the same thing.
That's fine.
Question of, everything's been said, but not all of us have said it, I guess. So the EIR is old, but it's still valid, right?
Correct. The EIR, let me just touch on that for a second. There was an EIR in 2001, and then there was an addendum, because if you recall, this originally was going to be a office area for Nokia.
Yes.
And so it was going to be, offices. So that was really what the 2001 identified it, and it also envisioned the entire site being covered. Again, in the same way this site pretty much views it to be all the habitat that might have been out there is considered to be gone. There's no remnant that's left. In 2004, there was an addendum where they envisioned this type of project. And then again in 2007, there was another addendum which brought it pretty close to what we're looking at today. Actually, it is what we're looking at today. Same plan, but that's when the economy took a dive. So CEQA law is what we're talking about now, allows for a document to persist, provided that there's no changes in the nature of the site, there's no changes in the nature of the project, and then one other element, which I skipped my head right now, but the bottom line is the EIR is still valid.
Okay, and you did, I've seen you mention this, that you brought a biologist out, I believe, last year?
That's correct.
Okay.
Actually, the applicant, yeah.
Good. All right, well, just a quick comment. I think the thing that catches out in my mind, it hasn't been teased out, but in the staff report, it mentions that the applicant actually has been diligently pursuing this project and is actually nearly complete, hopefully, with requirements for preliminary design. So with that, I'd be supportive of this tonight. I would just say a couple of last comments. Number one, I want to let Christopher know, most of us don't think your neighborhood's a farce. I think it's rather nice, actually. Secondly, I don't know if Mr. Miller heard it, but there's an interest in having a footpath to Lowe's. So as we go through this process, that's kind of like a nudge, nudge, a wink, wink. I think that would be a wonderful thing to make sure that fits in this community, and you've got your community out here saying they want it. So that would be a good thing. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Oh, you found it?
I found my notes,
Okay.
yes. Just a couple of items. So, not wanting exact figures, but it's just under 8 acres, the parcels that we're talking about for both commercial and residential. Is that right? Approximately, just under?
This portion of yes, that's correct.
Okay. And in looking at the overall, I'm just going to call it parcel at this point in time, it's roughly, although slightly larger on the residential side, but roughly a 50-50 break, roughly, when I'm looking at the tentative map.
Yeah, I would say that's probably about right. Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting to the point that, we're talking.
There's some recreation land there as well. There's
Right,
a pool
right.
and,
Right, but so those 3 commercial properties that are fronting 116 is just under 4 acres, and then looking at the residential side is just under 4 acres. So there's there's a good match there, because I'm hearing that, it's all residential, where's the commercial? So there is some commercial that's coming in, and to hear that Red's property is a possibility, that's a little bit more. And I remember my very first term on the council, some 20-something years ago, that there was an unfortunate referendum that was passed. And so I'm assuming these commercial properties would still be limited, and I thought the number was like 43,000 square feet or 46,000. I mean, is that still in play? I'm going back some
Yes.
20-something years.
we are not, we're under that. We're under that 43,000. I'll have to look. I've got to look to see exactly what the square footage is add up to, but my understanding is that would not come in, that would not be a factor, the decision that you had to make with Lowe's, for example.
Yeah, and I'm talking about individual businesses
Right.
being limited to that square footage, which is unfortunate because, there wasn't a lot of hindsight that, we may have an answer. Please, go ahead.
I would just add to what JP's saying, these properties were exempted from that square foot limit, from that square footage limit.
Okay, and was it 43, 46?
43,000.
43,000 square feet, okay. All right, well, that's good to hear, just because that really limits your scope. You know, if you're doing some commercial development and a business wants to come in and is proposing some 48,000 square foot facility, you know, we couldn't allow it, but if it's an exemption, then, okay.
That's how we got the Lowe's in there.
I understand that, yeah, but I didn't know if these parcels were under that, so. That's all I had, I think, for this. It's also good to hear from Christopher and the HOA, assuming that you didn't say this, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you can give me a yes or a no, that a majority of the HOA is in favor of moving this forward?
And we're working with them with feedback on design and everything. So
Okay.
we're actively working with the developer.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Are you good?
I'm good.
Everybody good? Okay, then what would you?
With that, Madam Mayor, I'd like to move a resolution granting one 12-month time extension to the Cotati Village vesting tentative map, inclusive of all previously adopted conditions of approval, resulting in a new expiration date of, let's count it, June 13th, 2018.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show a 4-0 with one absent. Okay, so let's see, where are we now? We are, I see we're changing seats. We're moving to the regular agenda, and we are moving to item A, which is adoption of resolution accepting the draft water and sewer rates and directing, you okay? Sorry.
Mayor, members of the council, Craig Scott, I'm the Public Works Director, City Engineer here at the city. This is a item here tonight is to revise the sewer and water rates for the city and to initiate the Prop 218 rate setting process. Back in January, the council authorized the hiring of Bob Reed to prepare a rate study, and so he has completed that rate study and is here tonight to make the presentation. It's normal for a city every 3 to 5 years to update their study because of changing expenses and water use. These are all, the 10-year model is done on projections, and so just to get a reality check on those projections, we need to revisit it every 3 to 5 years. So we're right there. We're right on time. The schedule basically initiate the Prop 218 rate setting process tonight, and it sets the date for the public hearing and the rate adoption. Shortly after this meeting, the rate notice will go out in a mailer to every single customer, and that has to be done 45 days ahead of the public hearing. Just to keep it short and sweet, I'll hand it over right now to Bob Reed for the presentation.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. I'd like to summarize the recommendations of the water and sewer rate study that we've been performing with staff over the last few months. The main objectives of the study were to look at the water and sewer utilities and to determine what their revenue needs were to provide sufficient revenues to maintain current operations, meet debt service obligations, and satisfy capital program needs. One of the focuses of this study was really to look at capital improvement needs. Typically, the ongoing day-to-day maintenance occurs, the cost of delivering water or treating wastewater. Debt service is an obligation that is met, and the capital program is kind of where things, if there isn't enough money, maybe things get put off a little bit. So that's always the place that's often a difficult catch. So that's where we wanted to focus some attention. Also, with the rate study, we wanted to make sure that the rates are complying with the legal requirements. Proposition 218 has some specific requirements regarding water and sewer rates, and there have been a number of court decisions related to Proposition 218 in that regard. So we wanted to make sure that the rates were updated in compliance with those requirements. And we wanted to maintain a structure that was easy to understand and considered fair by customers, as well as encouraging water conservation. One of the issues that we also want to look at is what happens in a future drought. With reduced water sales in the recent drought, that creates a certain amount of financial stress, and are there things that can be done to alleviate that problem? Wanted to add some tools to your toolbox to help you in a future drought situation. So the current water rates include a three-tier water usage rate structure for single-family homes, a uniform rate structure for multifamily homes as well as commercial businesses, and then a fixed monthly service charge or bi-monthly service charge based on the size of the water meter. Our proposed rate structure is really to maintain that same basic structure. However, we want to make sure that the rates meet the cost of service requirements, so we've gone through a separate cost allocation process to adjust the rates consistent with that, meeting the revenue needs as well as the proportionality requirements in allocating the cost. We wanted to put particular attention on the three-tier rate structure. There was a court decision a couple of years ago, San Juan Capistrano, you've probably heard of that. Some people think that prohibits tiered structure. That's not right. The court said that you could have a tier structure, but it needed to meet certain requirements in terms of having a cost basis for each of the tier rates. And so we looked at the rate structure on that basis. You've got water coming from Sonoma County Water Agency. You've got local groundwater that have different costs. You have water conservation program costs. We have different things that we can include in the different tier rates to justify that structure. And so we have done that. And then I'll get more to it in the later part of the presentation, talking about the shortage surcharges that we recommend being adopted as well. But I'll get into that detail a little bit later. With respect to the current sewer rate structure, we have a uniform rate that applies to all customers based generally on winter water use. It's referred to as a sewer average here, where we look at low water use months or two billing periods and average that. We look at those periods because that's a period of time where people generally aren't irrigating. So water going into the home and ends up in the sewer system, and so we can determine the appropriate bill amounts on that basis. So we use that, and then there's also a fixed service charge associated with the current rate structure on sewer as well. In terms of changing the structure, no real changes there. We want to, again, update it to reflect the cost of service requirements, meet the revenue needs. The one change, fairly minor changes, there is a separate rate or a couple of rates for restaurants that are higher usage rates on the sewer side related to strength characteristics. At this point in time, we'd actually like to recommend eliminating that difference and have the same rate for all. Two reasons for that. The Santa Rosa and the sub-regional system, they don't charge you differently for the quality, the strength characteristics of the waste, because you're not really paying a different rate because you've got restaurant flow mixed in. And second, there are other high-strength type users or medium-strength users that are not pulled out differently and charge something different as well. Grocery stores that have food grinders that put waste down, bakeries, other types of businesses that may also create high-strength rate waste are not being treated like restaurants are. So we thought, after some discussion on this, that the most appropriate thing to do at this point in time is to simplify the rate structure and have the same sewer rate for all different customer groups. So that's a summary generally of where we're going with the rates, but I want to step back now and go through some of the details. In going through this study, we developed 10-year financial plans for both of the utilities based on, we started with the 16-17 budget, and we've updated that to reflect the 17-18 budget that's been proposed. So that's been incorporated in the plan. And then we're estimating future costs by inflating those costs, mainly based on general inflation, but also considering the changes anticipated with Sonoma County Water Agency costs as well as sub-regional wastewater costs. We have a 10-year capital improvement program. We've been going back and forth with staff about looking at the timing of projects and the costs of projects and the implications of those, as well as other revenue sources, connection fees and so on, that could help fund that. So we're looking at ongoing operating cost, debt obligations in the capital improvement program, as well as maintaining prudent financial reserves. And for the operating fund, we're recommending working to maintain a 33% operating reserve. So that would be 33% or about 4 months of the annual operating costs as a floor in the operating fund. And that provides sufficient money for working capital needs and so on. We also, as part of this, while the financial plan looked out for a 10-year planning period, we are recommending specific rates covering a 5-year period. Our crystal ball isn't good enough to recommend rates going out for 10 years, but going out for a 5-year period makes sense. We can use a 10-year planning period to know what's on the horizon. and then have developed rate recommendations for a 5-year period. I generally recommend to clients that they review, as they go through the budget process, the financial condition of the utilities on an annual basis, and then maybe do an update of the rates every 3 to 5 years, depending on how much conditions change. But I think it is sound, and many of my clients now are adopting 5-year rate plans. Many of the cities in the county here have 5-year rate plans. So on the next slide, talking specifically about water, this graph depicts the revenues and expenses for the upcoming year for the water utility, with revenues on the left and expenses on the right. Most of the revenue are water rate revenues. There's a little bit of miscellaneous revenue on top of that in that orange band. On the expense side, we have our water purchase costs as our largest single item, buying water from Sonoma County Water Agency, and then other water distribution costs, including groundwater production costs. There's a little bit of debt service, and that's really a loan from the sewer utility that you're aware of, paying the debt on that, and then the capital program needs. You can see our revenues are not meeting those annual expenses here. There is a little bit of a gap. Also, while it's not shown in this graph, the reserve status, the amount of cash reserves within the water utility is pretty lean. It's been improved a little bit because we've taken some money from the recycled water fund and moved it into the water fund. I think you've addressed that as part of your budget process, so that has helped a bit. Otherwise, things would be quite a bit leaner in the water utility here. But what we want to do is make sure that we can close this gap between revenues and expenses, also anticipate future capital program needs, and maintain adequate reserve balances as we go forward. On the sewer side, a similar situation here with revenues on the left, expenses on the right. By far the largest cost associated with the sewer utility is the wastewater treatment costs with the sub-regional plant, Santa Rosa's Laguna Treatment Plant. Those expenses in that green shaded bar on the right side include both ongoing operating and maintenance costs as well as debt service obligations, and about half of that cost is Santa Rosa debt service, your share of that. In recent years, they've had some reserves for capital projects that they've been drawing down. That's changing. So they're anticipating some more significant rate increases. The initial draft of this study, in fact, the one that was in your packet, was indicating that they were anticipating 8% increases in Santa Rosa costs over the next few years, and then going down to 7% per year. The city manager had some discussions with the utilities director there, and we have reduced that. And so there's some additional information that was on the dais this evening for you. We've actually reduced the assumption for the cost increases from the sub-regional system in this analysis. So we're actually presenting slightly different sewer rate recommendations tonight than was contained in the draft report. Things have been moving, and we thought that was a good change to make, and we wanted to bring it to you as soon as we could. So, but we do have this again, a gap. The sewer utility does have healthier financial reserves, and so that buys us time, if you will, to close the gap so we can phase in the rate increases over a more extended period of time. We actually have a bit of a larger rate increase on water initially than we do on sewer, and then they're both similar to each other beyond that. But we have more catching up to do on water that's urgent, and we have more time on the sewer side. Getting to the capital improvement program, this is where looking at the capital program needs is a very important part of the analysis. As you know, we have capital projects that have peaks and valleys in the expenditures. You have small projects, and you have large projects. You have projects that all come at once, or there's a gap in that. And so you have these peaks and valleys. And part of the financial analysis is how can we set the rates and establish something that provides constant and stable funding in support of the capital program, let that absorb the peaks and valleys, rather than trying to meet the peaks and valleys with the revenue on a year-to-year basis. How can we smooth out that revenue stream to offset the peaks and valleys of the capital program? And this graph shows the blue are the water capital projects, the green are the sewer capital projects. The water over the 10-year planning period averages a little over $600,000 a year, but you can see substantial variation in that. And the sewer projects average about $750,000 per year, but again, significant variation. In fact, in the upcoming year, you've got a $3 million sewer project coming up, so that's 4 times the annual average. And so that's the sort of thing that we want to be able to dampen the effect of that as we look at the financial plan and develop the rates. I'm going to go through these graphs very quickly in the interest of time. Be happy to answer more questions. This summarizes the water utilities operating fund. The colored bands are the different costs, water costs and other distribution costs, debt service and capital program transfer. Red line is revenue. The key information on this graph, I feel, are the black lines. The dashed line is our minimum target operating reserve, so that's what we would like to stay above. The solid black line is the actual end of year fund balance there, and so we'd like to stay above that dashed line. This graph does reflect recommended rate increases. We do have some. We're above that dashed line currently, but as we spend money on capital projects and set aside money for that, it brings it down. We actually dip a little bit below that floor. Not an ideal thing to do, but in this case, being sensitive to the amount of the rate increases, we said, well, that's okay to go down a bit temporarily and then come back up towards the end of the planning period. The purple band with that, if we could go back just for a second, that purple band are our transfers to the capital fund. And if we go to the next slide, and that represents the red line here. So what we're trying to do is to provide some stable funding going into the capital program to offset the peaks and valleys of the capital program. That black line is the fund balance in the capital fund, and that goes up and down kind of in opposite. You know, you have a high expenditure year, it draws down the money. You have a low expenditure year, that can come back up. The money going into the capital fund is stable. The support from the rate base is relatively stable, and that's what we do to help stabilize the rates. Similar situation on the sewer utility, healthier fund balance here, so the black line is quite a bit higher. We do have those significant increases in sub-regional costs. We're assuming 5% a year, and that's a little bit lower than what we had originally started with. But you can see that green band. It's more than half of your costs are associated with sub-regional costs, and those are increasing. And so that's drawing down the fund balance, but we are able to stay above that minimum throughout the planning period and provide a certain amount of funding for the capital program. And that's reflected in the next graph. Again, using a constant funding of that capital fund, or trying to keep that relatively stable and letting the balance in that capital fund oscillate in opposite direction from the expenditure years. Kind of like a reservoir operation, if there's any engineers on the council here, a water reservoir operation. So, proposed water rates. This slide shows the 5-year recommended water rate schedule. Similar structure to the current structure. I did want to point out a couple of things. The main thing is we put quite a bit of emphasis on the 3-tier residential tier structure. And in fact, if you look at pages 35 through 38 in the draft report, there's quite a lengthy discussion that talks about how we justified each of the tier rates. And there's a table on page 38 that also shows how we looked at groundwater costs versus surface water costs and water conservation costs and allocated them to the tiers and compared that relative to the uniform rate for other customers. We also have adjustments to the bi-monthly service charges based on the size of the meter, but the overall structure remains the same. 2 things I'll point out about that tier structure. The first tier rate we're recommending is actually includes a decrease in the first year, so that actually goes down. That's beneficial for the low volume users that you may have in the community here, and may offset some of the increases elsewhere in the rate structure. And also the spread across the tiers is a bit wider, and this goes back to the cost of service justification that we had. That 3rd tier rate reflects the cost of Sonoma County water, as if that's 100% water in that 3rd tier. And then the other 2 tiers include a mix of groundwater and surface water. And then we also took water conservation program costs, and we said, well, we don't really need the customers in that base usage. That's not driving our conservation costs. So we'll recover the conservation program costs just in the 2nd and the 3rd tier. So that's the general basis for the account structure. So, in a 5-year plan here, starting with the first rates going in effect in October and then each July thereafter. On the sewer rates, maintaining the same basic structure here, we have the bi-monthly service charge tied to the size of the meter, a uniform commodity rate. You can see the rate for restaurants will be the same as for residences with these changes, and it'll continue to be based on the sewer average in most cases. There are some accounts that have a separate irrigation meter, and if that is the case, well, then the actual water use going into the business, rather than taking a winter average, they just use the actual use, and that's because the irrigation is captured through a separate meter. So what does this mean for customer water bills? This slide summarizes a typical residential water and sewer bill, both currently and then going out over the 5-year period with each of the rate adjustments. So you can see the change in water and sewer and then the combined bill over that time period. This assumes a standard 3/4-inch meter, 10,000 gallons bimonthly of water use, and 7,000 gallons of that sewer average for the sewer bill calculation. Over the 5-year period, the water bill would go up about $21, and the sewer bill would go up about $42 over a 5-year period, gradually increasing. We wanted to compare how the recommended rates compare with some of the neighboring communities, so we created this graph. You're on the lower half of the range, and even with the rate adjustments, in October you would still be in the lower part of the range, low to middle part of the range. Most of the communities here in the county go through annual rate adjustments, have multi-year plans or automatic adjustments in some cases tied to changes in water supply costs and that sort of thing. And I know other utilities are going through their own rate studies right now too. So I can't project what their rates are going to be out for 5 years, but compared with right now and where the first year recommendation, you're still in the lower half of relative to neighboring communities. I wanted to shift over to that other issue, dealing with water shortage conditions here. We went through a financial analysis that looked at what happened, what is the financial impact of the utility if you're selling less water because of a drought or other water shortage. You have within your policies guidelines, with a voluntary stage 1 condition, and then stage 2 from 10 to 20% water use reduction, and stage 3 20 to 30% water use reduction. Both those second and third stages include mandatory use restrictions. This have a graph that shows the financial deficit created as you sell less water through those different stages. And then we wanted to develop a stage where, in part, you lean on your available reserves to close the gap, and particularly in stage 1 where everything is voluntary, that you just reach into your pocket and you absorb the hit a little bit. And then as you get into the more severe stages with mandatory use restrictions, that we create a supplemental surcharge on the bill that charges people a little bit based on their usage to help close the gap. So in part, you're continuing to reach into your pocket, use reserves, but you're also asking customers to help meet the financial needs. And this becomes more important if you have multi-year drought where you may have limited reserves. And it also lessens the impact of dealing with the financial conditions after the drought ends. And so with the surcharge structure, in stage 2, we would recommend a 10% surcharge that would be applied to the water usage rates. It would not affect the service charge, but just the water usage rate. And in stage 3, a 20% surcharge, again, just on the usage charge. The benefit of this type of a structure is those customers that meet the water use reduction goals. So if you ask people to cut back 15 or 20% in stage 2 and you have this surcharge, they'll pay a little bit on their bill with that surcharge, but their bill will still be lower than their normal bill with normal usage. If they don't conserve, they'll be paying a little bit more. But if they do conserve, even though they are paying something extra with the surcharge, their bill has still gone down a little bit. And that's demonstrated here on this graph, and it would be true over a range of different usages. There's more information on that analysis in the report as well. So I've covered a lot of information very quickly here. The next steps, as we see it in this process, is we'd like to hear if there's any comments or questions or direction from council tonight. Our plan is to go from this meeting and to finalize the rate study and the recommendations. We do need to incorporate these changes on the sewer rates that we talked about. And then initiate a Prop 218 process. There's a mailed notice that needs to go out to all customers 45 days prior to a rate hearing. A draft of the notice has been provided to you, so that's pretty much what we would plan on mailing out. And then that would bring us to a rate hearing on August 8th. So the recommendation for you this evening is that you accept the draft study report with the revisions that we'd like to incorporate, and that we be directed to start the Prop 218 process. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Would you like to start?
Unless somebody else wants to jump in, I might have a couple.
Go for it.
So the first one, I think, Mr. Reed, might be more for staff, but don't go away, because I think the second one might be probably in both your areas.
Certainly.
So I wanted to ask, if we look at packet page 56, there is an example, and you had a slide up recently of where the city of Cotati and its combined utility charges, sewer and water, falls compared to other cities in the region, including the town of Windsor, the city of Petaluma, et cetera. And the current rates were pretty low. And the change, as you pointed out, moves us up just past Windsor, but we're still in the middle of the pack, so not a bad place to be. The question I want to ask is this, and it might have been covered in here, but I didn't see it. At what stage of the reassessment process are these cities? Have they just, because this actually has a bearing, have they just reassessed? Do they reassess their costs yearly? In other words, are they likely to go up and drop us down farther in the pack? Or have they just done this? Because if we're going to use comparables, I kind of need to know where they are in the process. If these cities all were like us, had not adjusted their rates in a while, and we're about to look at it, it would seem likely that they might jump up as well. So I wonder if you could just give me a sense, to the degree you know, where they're at in that process.
That's certainly drilling into that analysis deeper, and I'm not prepared to answer that. I mean, just randomly, some are going to have just approved theirs, and some are on the brink of approving them and are on the same schedule or similar schedule that we are on. So I don't know, do you have an insight into that, Bob?
Yes. Rohnert Park is going through their Prop 218 process right now to adopt changes to their water rates. They are looking at water and sewer.
They look pretty low here, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and they are looking at a 5-year rate plan with increases. And then they're also talking about doing a sewer rate study next fiscal year, so that's on the horizon. Windsor is about to start a rate study next month, and so they've asked me to assist with that. And they generally do rates every 2 years, although they're also considering looking at a longer period of time. And Santa Rosa has an automatic water rate adjustment each year, water and sewer rate adjustments each year based on tied to inflation, and the water tied to Sonoma County changes in costs. Healdsburg has a similar 5-year rate plan with adjustments dialed in. So those are the ones that I know about, but...
That gives me enough data. It would appear that they're all moving quickly enough that even if we were to move forward and jump ahead of Windsor, we certainly probably aren't moving past that, and we might very soon move behind that. And even as this oscillates over the next 5 years, we're going to stay right in that region, is the sense I get. Am I reading that right?
I think that's a fair statement, absolutely.
Okay. That was an easy one. So, well, I don't know. I thought it was easy. So the second question I had for you, a little more general, let me lay it out. So one of the reasons we're looking for an increase, both for water, but particularly for sewer, as I understand it, is we're looking to make sure we can allow necessary capital projects to keep the system running. You said something about keeping things moving, and I thought that was very appropriate when you were talking about sewage. Everybody wants that. And also building reserves at the same time, and it's smart. I fully agree with the idea of having reserves, not just to have money in the bank, but to act as a smoothing function to keep rate shock. We learned how much better it is to deal with the water agency once they learn to do that. It's been much better. So I could see the value for our ratepayers. Here's the question I have. Although all these rate increases year by year and bi-monthly bill by bi-monthly bill are pretty small for the consumer, they're not going to feel a lot of shock from that. If you add them all up in terms of percentages, especially if we go out the full 10 years, even without compounding it, which we're not figuring in here, that's a pretty strong increase. So what I need to hear is, these capital projects we're looking at, we have lists of them. I want to get a sense of, is there room to move to distribute them over a slightly longer time period to lessen that increase? Or does that get into us a place where we're starting to defer maintenance and run into some potential expensive problems with that? I know just as a homeowner, sometimes you can save bucks for a few months putting something off, but then later you have a more pricey repair. So I want to hear somebody speak to me a little bit about that, because that might give me some more comfort with this.
Sure, maybe I'll start. I'm sure Craig will chime in here as well. We started with a 10-year capital improvement program that he had developed, and it created pretty significant rate shock. And so, we said, how flexible is there with the timing of some of these projects? And we started moving some of them out. Your city manager said, well, we need to pull some of these in because they're really important. And so there was quite a bit of jockeying back and forth to come up with something that met the city's needs as well as was sensitive to the magnitude of the rate increases that would be implicated by that capital program. So.
Yeah, and certainly the drop-off in demands has taken pressure off of the water side capital projects. So there is some relief in pushing ability to push those projects out a little bit. We've got the Cypress tank, which is driving most of the cost.
The fabled Cypress?
Yeah.
I've heard tell of the Cypress tank.
It's mentioned here quite a bit. And the pipeline that goes along with it, the pressure zone. And so those are sort of main players in the water capital project, as well as a priority water main for correcting a deficiency. And then on the sewer side, front and center is the Laguna bypass sewer that is close to $3 million that we're closing in on final design on and looking to put out to bid hopefully in the fall.
So not a good time to put the brakes on that.
No, and that one is actually, we don't have much flexibility on moving that because it is addressing a current deficiency, a bottleneck that we do want to, with what's going on in the city. It's addressing existing and some future capacity issues that we want to get corrected.
And some of the water issues are main size or flow improvements too, I understand. Is that correct?
Yes, similar to the one we did just now in West Cotati over there. That was a 4-inch main up to an 8-inch, and that was to provide fire flow and peak hour capacities. So we have another one of those on Portal Street.
Well, there's a price with that, but I can't complain about the fire safety aspect, that's for sure, certainly in our neighborhood. And I am pleased to see, I don't know if we give our city manager credit for this, but knocking the cost from the sub-regional system down from 7 to 8% to 5%. I don't know if we can give you full credit for that, but I'm pleased to see that's a much more comfortable number, and that was very helpful for me, so thank you.
I was happy to see that change, so
I can imagine. Very good.
John, did you have a question?
At least one question at this point in time. So in the proposed rates that are in the study, was anything built in setting those rates with any either known or unknown or estimated rate increases to the sub-regional system? Do we know of any, say in a 5-year period that we were looking at, do we know of any that are proposed at this time, or did we build in any kind of a buffer for any that could occur that we may not know of right now?
And that was one of the items early on in the study. We had some informal discussions. Craig talked with some staff in Santa Rosa, and they were saying, oh, we've drawn down these capital reserves now, and so we're going to have to start charging for capital projects, and we've got some increased operating costs. And so they were saying 8% for a few years and then 7% in terms of what they were anticipating. They said, we haven't taken these forward yet, but that's sort of what we're thinking at the staff level. And then more recently, the conversation that Damien had with the utilities director was more refined in terms of hasn't gone through the BPU, hasn't gone through city council, and so he was thinking more about 5% would be a more realistic number.
Right.
So the alternative that was given to you this evening reflects a 5% annual increase in sub-regional costs rather than the 8 and 7%.
I think what got our attention this year is we would be facing an 8% increase. However, they drew $60,000 from our capital reserve, and now that reserve is down to under $11,000. So we're no longer able to draw that to half our rates. So it is an issue going forward that we'll have to watch closely to keep those rates at a reasonable level.
Then let me ask one more question regarding proposed rates for the city. Are we, over the 5-year period, are we, again, not knowing the direction, but assuming there's direction to move this rate study forward, are we locking in the 5 years, or is there still flexibility annually if there's some unknown rate increase that comes up 2 or 3 years out from the sub-regional system? You know, do we have the ability to look at, say, I'm going to use the word buffering that, you know, without any kind of a steep increase to the users, but knowing that there's still some capital reserve that has to be there?
So what is recommended is a 5-year rate plan, so with annual adjustments for the 5-year period. We think that it is more than adequately supported by the financial plan and the analysis showing a need for that amount of revenue on an annual basis for covering costs, dealing with the capital program, maintaining reserves. All of those important issues are reflected in there. If it turns out the sub-regional system does 3% increases or something rather than 5%, and you discover 3 years from now, 4 years from now, oh, we don't need that, you can always back off on the rates and say, okay, we're going to skip this increase or we're going to cut it in half, and you don't need to go through a formal process. If they end up, and they do need to do 8% rate increases, and 3 years from now you need a bit more, then you would be faced with having to maybe go through another rate study or a process to approve higher rates above that. Okay. So it's prudent to adopt rates for the 5 years because it puts you on a trajectory, which is really helpful for addressing those concerns. You can always back off. You can never charge more than the cost of service, so if things didn't materialize, you'd have to adjust. And it also saves you the time and expense of hiring me or, you know, having to print out, you know, all of these notices to customers and going through the process, which is costly and time-consuming as well.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious if there was some level of flexibility built in both directions, but it sounds like there is.
Yes.
Great. All right, thank you.
John, did you have questions?
I do. I don't know if it might be more for staff versus you, Bob, thank you, but in these projections and the estimated cost of these capital improvements, what's our margin on those? Because as we know, every time we go, or every time I think something is a certain price, it comes back and it's significantly more, or, you know, what's our spread there?
Well, we do, we have estimates in the master plans that were done
years ago?
5, 6 years ago, and adjusted those by construction cost indices. And there are some at that planning level estimate. We have 20% construction contingency and general percentages for engineering and design and construction management. So those are industry averages that are sort of tracked and over time, and we can get surprised if the market gets really hot and the bids come in high, and that could throw us a curveball. If the economy goes down, then it's actually okay. It's better for us bidding the public projects, because we saw that in the 2007, 8, 9, all the way through there, that we got very competitive bid prices. So it isn't. I can't tell you exactly what the. It's good to be within 10%, so the bids could come in 10% high, and we should be able to absorb that. Anything above that, it gets sort of outside.
Right, it throws the rates off altogether.
Yeah, we have to do some trade-offs.
Yeah. Okay, so roughly 10%?
Yeah, plus or minus 10, we could probably absorb on a given project.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else?
No.
No? I have a couple questions. So Vice Mayor Landman kind of alluded to this. We have, with the water agency, we actually have the advisory group, and we participate with the building of that. Now, we don't have a similar situation, so not only do we have our own citywide capital projects that we need to maintain our infrastructure, the treatment plant itself has capital projects that need to be implemented to keep it up to snuff. What avenues do we have, since we don't have an advisory group with them, unless you tell me we do, what do we have to influence those, much like the pain that we went through with the water agency a while back, where they were, jacking our rates up and down, and we finally have them kind of, smoother. So do we have any influence on that?
Well, we do have a WAC, or a TAC, a technical committee that does meet, and it's a lot more lower key, and not a lot of fanfare around those meetings, but there were 3 meetings every year. There's two just preparing us for the vote, and then the third one where it's like, okay, we need an action, a decision from the WAC. And so this year, what was identified, and I don't want to really go on about it, but the NPDES permit is up. That's a big regulatory hurdle that they need to address for the plant. Their ultraviolet UV disinfection system needs some pretty significant repairs and renewals to them. And they're purchasing buffer land, which has become available. They have a fund for it. So it's similar to the water WAC TAC in that they put on the table, hey, increased labor costs, and these are our maintenance projects that are coming up, and we try to push those off and to try to arrive at a reasonable rate. So it's similar. It's very similar to that process, and we do try to, the sub-regional agencies try to influence the rates to be more reasonable, practical for us.
And I'll just add, the sub-regional agencies, so we all pay the same wastewater treatment costs as a percentage of flow, but that's Rohnert Park, Cotati, Sebastopol, Santa Rosa, and that's it. It was South Park, but now it's part of Santa Rosa. So what the utility director shared with me is that, and we already knew that a lot of the capital costs at the sub-regional plant are driven by existing deficiencies. So not they call it, the term they use is preservation. So preservation of existing assets. Because of the multi-year drought, there hasn't been this. They had these multi-year plans that were looking at future wastewater flows being, going up by these large amounts over time, and none of that has materialized, primarily because of the drought situation and people's related water conservation. So that whole expansion piece of the plant has largely gone away, and they've been focusing on preservation of their existing assets. And so they've been trying to get away from bond issuances to pay for things and have, for lower level capital projects, have them cash funded instead of bond funding everything, which is pretty much what they did previously in prior years, the sub-regional plant. And they're also looking at this fall, they're going to be taking a deeper dive into their operational expenses, as well as other revenue opportunities that the utility director is just kind of off the cuff knows about, and they need to explore more. So they may be pulling in new sources of revenue. They may be cutting costs on operations in various areas. So there's so all that stuff is going on, and I expect there'll be future discussions later this year about that.
Well, I guess the good news is the fact that the city of Santa Rosa is running this. They also have constituents, and so it's a little bit different than the water agency, where they're like once removed. So if the city of Santa Rosa is going to raise rates for theirs, at least they're
the largest contributor of flows.
Exactly. So they feel our pain, shall we say. My other question has to do with, you talked about a 33% operating reserve. Is that a best practice? Is that similar to other cities? in the county. What, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. It's pretty common to see operating reserves of this nature ranging from 25 to 50% of annual operating costs, including debt service obligations. Probably more common around the 25% level. I generally suggest for smaller utilities that they're up closer to the 50% because it's a smaller operation, and when a pump goes out unexpectedly, it's going to cost something, whether you're big or small. And so that's why I think originally I was suggesting maybe about 50% for the city here, and then we landed on 33%. Is feeling like that was appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Then you might have to come back, but I will open this up for public comments.
I will stick around.
Okay. Yes, Lori.
With all due respect to the last speaker, this is one of the reasons why we should have had an extra council meeting. This has gone on for 45 minutes, an hour for a presentation, and we still have the budget and everything to do. So just that. One item of the study that struck me was that it's estimated Cotati's growth will be 124 housing units per year until 2021. From 2006 to 2015, you had a total of 9 new building units. This year, you've had like 200. So, I mean, that's the difference. But you guys are assuming with the study that you'll continue this building trend. And I don't know how much of the building costs of the sewer and that is included in the capital improvements. Generally, also, the service charge will go up 50% within 5 years, which is much more than the rate of inflation, and people will already pay a lot of taxes and everything here. The per gallon water rates would go up about 30%, and that certain businesses, and I know my friend who owns the kennel, she uses a lot of water, so those kind of things, when you have a variable one like the per gallon, that's going to be some problems. And I do understand you needed it 45 days for the hearing, but again, this could have been done a week ago because you had 3 weeks between council meetings. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. George, yes.
Well, thank goodness we have not been experiencing much inflation. I don't know how much inflation we're going to be expecting, but our water bills are not small, Mr. Landman, and some of us don't make six-figure incomes in retirement. I've talked to a lot of people on fixed incomes in Cotati, some retirees, people on Social Security, and a couple people told me right to my face, George, I spend more on water and sewer than I do on groceries. Okay, and that's a reality for some of the people in town. Our water bills are not small. And excuse me if I'm making too much sense here, but water rates keep going up, 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 up. I never remember the rates going down. The consultant here talks about the need to raise rates for a number of reasons, one being an impending future drought or series of droughts. Okay. What about impending future floods? What about years of flood? We have more water than we could ever use, and it becomes a problem. What happens to the rates there? I wasn't clear on the explanation. We talk about conservation, water conservation, water conservation. But why not look at water use in times of abundance? We have talked about nothing tonight about new water storage facilities, Nothing about new reservoirs. Nothing about any capital improvement projects to store more water, to create more water. Just new ways to charge the people more money to use less water. And isn't that the trend? Pay more for less. Pay more for less. And we consumers are all payers, no matter if you're a single family unit or you're a business, whether your hookup is 3/4 inch hookup or 3-inch hookup. We're all paying. The people are all paying for this. Businesses don't pay taxes. They don't pay the water rates. They pass the water rates on to the consumers. Everywhere you go to shop, every place you go, you're paying for that water. During flood conditions, will there be a 3-tier rate? Will there be a 3-tier rate during flood conditions so that the more you use, the less you pay? I didn't hear anything about that tonight. That makes sense. When prices go down and the more water that you use, prices should go down in flood years. But we never hear about the flood years. We always hear about the droughts, the fear of the drought. It's coming. You know, that's why this is not an honest conversation about water. It never is. It's always about, well, we need to have reserves here, and maybe we'll stay within 10% of our capital improvement there, and maybe we won't be hit with an earthquake, or maybe we won't be hit with this or that. I'm sorry, Mayor, I see that now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? See none, I will bring it back. Would staff care to address some? Oh, you do? Okay, well, go for it.
Staff takes a look. Good point indeed. We should be concerned about storage with water because we live in a place where it's abundant during the winter, but then during the summer there's just not enough. But actually, if you look at packet page 65, if we look at the water capital programs plan, and this is, of course, over the full 10 years, but a lot of it's in the upfront 5, there are 2 separate storage tank projects, there is a well replacement, and there are 3 separate items for groundwater banking, a feasibility study, pilot study, as well as implementation, which is a long-range, big-time way of planning for storing that abundant summertime water. So, although we didn't talk about it, you might well expect we've been planning this for years and it is in here. So that actually, you make the argument there's a value in this because those types of things are necessary. So I thank you for bringing that up.
And along with that, part of what's going on with the SGMA process with the wells and things, that is sort of one thing that will be looked at is, you know, how do we save more water, and how do we replenish the basins that we have. So first we have to look at what's out there, who's taking it, you know, and so on and so forth. But then we're going to have to figure out how is it that we manage that, because we have the surface water and the groundwater. So we'll get there. It's a fair comment. I've been hearing about the Cypress tank for a really long time, so maybe at some point that will happen, because that's supposed to be 1 million gallons, last I heard, but who knows, it moves around. But what about the assumptions on growth? Where did those come from?
Yes, there was a lot of interplay between this study and the budget. They happened, much of the work was done at the same time. And so when you see in the next item, there is an assumption in there about growth. Those are the projections, assumptions that we use. So we have a number of developments that are moving along through the development process. And so we've taken a look at what those mean in the coming years. And so you'll see those projections here, and you'll see those projections in the budget, which is the next item. And it is a big jump from the past years where we had pretty much stagnant growth because of the drop-off in the economy. Things are really starting to pick up.
Well, and it was pointed out earlier that we may see another bubble burst. That's always a possibility, and then the assumptions will change, and some of these estimates, who knows, 5 years from now, that may, those assumptions may change. There was a comment made about the service charges going up 50%.
If we can get that slide back on the screen there, Lauren. We did try to express what the impact was on the customer. So that's what this slide shows. And there is the split between the fixed charge and the quantity charge is about, I believe it's 56% fixed and the other quantity charge. And some argue that 100% should be quantity. However, that leads to a very difficult to manage utility because that's varying, as we've seen, drop 25% since 2013. And so since a lot of our costs are fixed, it goes to the, we hear a lot in droughts that, we're paying more for less. Well, the capacity of our facilities and the labor we have here and the chemicals and the pumping charges and all of those things, we have to pay for those even though the water demand drops off. We have a lot of fixed costs that don't vary too much. The idea too that when water is plentiful, that maybe there's a massive reservoir and we just have to open a valve and it just flows by gravity or by magic into our faucets. That's a myth as well. There's our storage that we have is for meeting peak hour demands. They don't carry us month to month to month. We don't have our goal is not to have treated water storage to sit there to carry us over for 3 years. That water would get stale. It'd be really expensive and impractical. So we rely on the flow through the water cycle to get us in from the groundwater to then put that water in our storage tanks. It's we need hundreds of times our volume of storage if we were going to take that strategy. So it's just the water is really constrained by our facilities. And it's optimizing our efficiency, and there's a real sweet spot where the facilities meet our demands, and it meets our demands basically.
A couple things
Quick question through the mayor before we get off this slide. The sewer charges we show in those middle, is this an updated slide that includes the new estimation?
Yes.
Good, thank you.
And the notice also reflects that.
So one of the things I just wanted to point out so that nobody loses sight of this is that both on the water and the sewer side, a major part of the cost of that on the water side is the water agency supply, and even more so on the sewer side is the sub-regional treatment costs. If you recall that graph, it's I believe it's something like 2/3 of our cost on the sewer side, and that even at 5%, that escalates year over year, and it becomes significant. And that's a cost that it's not unique to Cotati, right? So virtually all the cities, with the exception of Sebastopol on the water side, are connected to the water agency distribution or wholesale system, and so they're paying that same charge. On the sewer side, it's all the sub-regional partners I mentioned, which is Santa Rosa, Sebastopol, Rohnert Park, and us, which are all connected to the sub-regional system, and we're all paying those same charges too. So you have major cost drivers that are not unique to Cotati. They're regional in nature. And I will also just make the point that on the water side, with respect to water agency charges, in prior years when we had a built-in rate assumption, because in rate studies you have to make an assumption about cost escalations. And on the, for the water agency supply, we have adjusted that in the past when actual costs came in lower than what was assumed in the rate study, to the benefit of the customers. And on the sewer side, we haven't adjusted rates there since, at all, since 2008. So it's almost 10 years now where we've been keeping it at the same rate it was in 2008. So there's, I think it's a mischaracterization to say that costs are always going up. We do what we can to manage costs and keep them as low as we can.
Well, and I think that we work very hard with the water agency to try and manage what's going on and manage that whole system and do what we can to keep those costs down. And was pointed out, as far as capital projects, building up those funds to be able to pay for those capital projects over time, and also trying to keep some balance in the rates. I mean, we have sort of given the water agency direction that kind of says, don't bring us any rates that are above 6% because we're not going to go there. And also the city has done very well, Damian and Craig, at that balance between using our groundwater and using water agency water to kind of help balance out some of those rates too. And that's been, I'll have to say that's been a luxury, if you will, because, when we go forward, maybe 10 years from now, and we have to start managing that groundwater, there's probably going to be costs associated with managing that right now we kind of think they're free. Well, they're not. Those basins are being depleted, and we certainly don't want to get into a situation like the Central Valley has, where they have land subsidence and, that they really don't have water. So, this is something we work really hard, to try and balance. I mean, as you just pointed out, the fact that we haven't raised sewer rates in 9 years is pretty significant, because I don't believe that any of the other cities really can really say that. So thank you for that work in doing that. Certainly, I would.
Thank you. One last point I want to make. It just seems like a travesty to me that, the new ratepayers, the new construction that gets built in Cotati, they pay the same rate as many of us who have been here for 20, 30, 40 years. And there was water here when we came here. And it just seems unfair. The new construction should pay a higher rate. They are the ones that are putting the extra burden on the system. And that never seems to be talked about. And maybe in the future we'll address that.
That's a good point, and maybe I'm sure 218 may say something about that. There may be rules around that. I don't know, but it.
Right. So that's maybe someone else can speak to this too. But I'll just basically say that for new connection fees, there's a buy-in cost for existing. So when you're building a new house and you pay to connect to the water system, that total payment consists of several subparts. One of them is buying into the existing system. So you're paying a certain charge to buy into what's there today. And then you're also paying even more for part of the future improvements that need to be made to the system to accommodate the growth. So that's all bundled into the connection fee. That way nobody gets a free meal, unless you're under 18 and you want to get a free meal at our Civic Center. But aside from that, nobody gets a free meal.
Okay. John, yes.
I just wanted to remind, for the benefit of the public, there were times when Sonoma County had no water in the 70s, and I remember that there was no development because we had no water. So we didn't always have water, when we got here. It goes up and down, and that's why we're trying to level these.
Are we ready for a motion?
Any more questions?
I have nothing substantive
Okay,
to add.
then there we go.
I would
Then
love
yes,
to.
we are.
With that, then I'll move adoption of a resolution accepting the draft water and sewer rate study and directing staff to proceed with the Proposition 218 public noticing process for the proposed water and sewer rate adjustments, and to set a date for the public hearing and adoption of rates.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Let that show 4-0.
Speaking of water, can we take a bio break?
All right, we will take a 5-minute break. All right. I'm going to time you. Thank you.
You don't have a GPS sticker on, do you?
No, I don't. So with that, shall we move on to the budget?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, here we go. Exciting times.
Okay, good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Tonight we are presenting to you the City of Cotati citywide budget final review. And let me start off by saying that the proposed 17-18 budget for the City of Cotati reflects the allocation of resources consistent to the city policies, goals, and priorities. Just to give everyone an idea of how the city's budget process looks like, the development of the budget is a year-round process. Forgot to start with this one. Oh, thank you. Here we go. So the development of the budget is a year-end process. The process began in the fall of each year with the mid-year budget review. The mid-year review allows the city to monitor and track expenses, as well as assess the performance of revenues, which will then provide guidance as we move forward to the next fiscal year. The mid-year also allows us to provide overall transparency in the city's operations, projects, and programs mid-year. So following the mid-year budget review, city department heads met together to assess departmental performances, which is then followed with meetings with the Council for Strategic Planning, where Council established priorities on the upcoming budget, reflecting policy concerns of the community at large. In the spring of this year, the city manager also scheduled the budget study sessions and released the proposed budget to the City Council for review. Then the City Council discussed the proposed budget the past 2 sessions, and tonight we're here for hopefully for the final budget adoption in June. And I just want to mention that throughout the year, the Admin Services continues to monitor the city's budget. And tonight I will start off by highlighting some of the economic updates that we've gone through the past month or so. On the national and state side, the national economy continued to grow, but at a slow pace. Unemployment on the national level is at 4.8, and at the state level is 5.2. And California unemployment rate dropped below 5% by the end of 2017. The California housing market also continued to rebound, but at a slower pace than last fiscal year, and will continue to have a slower pace due to inventory and affordability constraints in California. Comparatively to Sonoma County, there we are expecting another slow growth as well. Unemployment rate is at 3.6 in the Sonoma level, but I think we mentioned also a month ago that the Cotati is at 4.2 unemployment rate. Housing market is very strong, and the Cotati median sale price single home is at $430,000, which is a 13.2 increase from 2015. So just a recap, we had 2 budget sessions, mainly back in May 16th, which we covered the general fund, and we went through a line item review of revenues and departmental expenses. We also had a study session on the capital projects and the transfers in and out. On May 30th, we went through the special revenue funds, the recreation department, and the enterprise funds. The next 2 slides just covers a summary of all the funds that we are covering for tonight. It covers the general fund, various governmental funds, including capital projects, special revenue funds, and proprietary funds, which includes internal service funds and the enterprise funds, namely water funds and sewer funds. So let's start off with the general fund. The proposed budget for 17-18. Just to give you the general fund highlights, total operating revenues is at $6.9 million. Total operating expense is $5.8 million. The proposed expenditures not exceeding total estimated revenues. The budget is estimated to end the year with a net operating surplus of $1.13 million, with the ending general fund balance of $4.2 million. And the budget that we're presenting and proposing tonight includes a 25% required reserve. And the budget also reflects a total reserve of 73% of the general fund, which is the highest in recent years. Continuation of the general fund highlights. Let's talk about the city manager's department. This includes the following changes: inclusion of the economic development and public information services under the city manager department. It also includes the increases due to the allocation of the shared cost through the indirect cost. The legal services department is eliminated, and due to the implementation of the cost. Bad news.
That's why Robin's not here and you're here.
No. It's actually part of the normal indirect cost that's been part of the cost allocation that we are proposing this year. So it's not a total elimination of expenses, just allocation of these expenses to other funds. So what we have in here are basically indirect costs that are not necessarily particularly reflected on a particular department, but it's shared cost among departments. Okay. Moving forward is the Park Recreation Department, which was previously reported under the Fund 207. However, this is now being reflected as part of the general fund, given the fact that before it was considered as a special revenue fund, but given the nature and the function of the Recreation Department, it is now being merged as part of the general fund, just like any other departments within the city itself. So regarding the city implemented cost allocation method, the Government Finance Officers Association encouraged government to apply best practices by allocating their indirect cost. And it's vital for the health of the city to determine that all expenses are allocated accordingly and appropriately to the general services and support. And the allocation method that we discussed a month ago was based on a full-time equivalency. And nothing has changed on that. And again, just to give a recap on what the citywide allocation is, the citywide allocated contract services expenses, including various administrative overhead costs, including auditing, financial reporting, legal and general counsel, insurance, citywide technology, and data management. Those costs are being shared among departments in the city. Another highlight on the general fund is that we do have reflecting the COLA for the CPOA and the CPMA and the non-rep. The police department includes a proposed additional officer. The CA also includes one change in class and a new part-time rec assistant. And as of this evening, the CA is still under negotiations. Also, a transfer from public safety to special revenue funds, which includes COPS grants of $100,000, a BSCC grant of $15,000, and public safety Prop 172, which is of $45,000. Transfer out from the general fund includes capital project funds of about $590,000, grants fund of $87,500, CDBG funds of $100,000, a vehicle replacement of $150,000. To give you the highlights on the capital projects, under the grant-funded project summary, we have the School Street pathway being proposed for this fiscal year 17-18, along with the Cater Field access improvements, the way finding program signage, and the OBAG project design, which is at the East Katati Rehabilitation tracks to city limits. Along with that, we also have equipment acquisitions, which includes a police vehicle purchased through the Vehicle Replacement Fund and one administration vehicle purchased through the capital projects and enterprise funds. And to give you a summary of the capital projects that will be included in this year includes Sunflower Park tennis courts, the Veranda Folletti Ranch building improvements, the park planning playground equipment, the road paving maintenance repair, the citywide traffic safety improvements, La Plaza School Street Tunnel McGinnis Bridge lighting, community development engineering remodel, and the Civic Center roof replacement repairs. These capital projects are exactly what was presented last month, and nothing has been changed. And again, the next two slides are just basically what has been presented to the council and consistent to what was the summary on the narratives. So we would like to go over the Special Revenue Fund highlights for tonight. Let's talk about the CDBG. The CDBG includes a project for the School Street pathway and the Cater Field access improvement. The estimated cost for this project is $246,000, of which $146,000 is funded through the county grants or CDBG, and the remainder to be funded by the general fund. For the gas tax, the new tax introduced by Governor Brown is estimated to bring an additional $41,000 this year, 17-18. That is a prorated amount, but we're expecting greater in 18-19, roughly around $60,000 to $80,000. Also under the gas tax, this includes a $200,000 to be transferred to Fund 605 for street construction and improvement projects. Again, exactly the same thing as what was presented the last time. For the MTC, we are estimating a revenue consistent from prior years, and that's about $55,000, a transfer of about $150,000 to Fund 605 for street construction and improvement projects. And for traffic mitigation, an increase in estimated revenues of approximately $700,000 due to the new developments. The amount estimated here is consistent to what we presented the last time as well, and it's the same amount. And we are transferring $27,000 to Fund 605 for citywide traffic safety improvements. For the Park and Lieu, we're seeing an increase in estimated revenues of approximately $100,000 due to new developments. And this is consistent to the development fees. Nothing has been changed in our projections and projections of developments, and so we are presenting the same revenue estimate for tonight, with $250,000 to be transferred to Fund 605 for the following park projects, inclusive of Sunflower Park, Folletti Building, the Katati Park, and the lighting project. And for the public safety, the major change in this fund is the reclassification of the Prop 172. We determined that this particular fund is more like, in its function is more of a special revenue fund, and so it's being reclassed from the general fund before to a special revenue fund this year. But then this money will still be transferred to fund some of the administrative costs and operating costs of the public safety. It's just a presentation that is now being considered as a special revenue under the public safety fund. Under the inclusionary housing, revenue is considered consistent with prior year's budget, and expenditure increase of approximately $20,000 for the new housing subsidy cost, consistent to what we presented the last month as well. And for the excess bond proceeds, nothing has changed, and the balance is consistent to prior years. So this is the one, the Internal Service Fund, the Vehicle Replacement Fund. I know, Madam Mayor, you had mentioned about funding the vehicle replacement fund. And so based on our assessment, the city manager discussed that there is a way for us to initiate a seed money to cover the vehicle replacement fund. So for this year, we are starting off with $150,000 to start off the vehicle replacement fund initial funding. Moving forward from here, we are going to be assessing the inventory and the needs of the capital replacement of these vehicles. But this is going to be a good start for us to fund future replacement costs of the city's vehicle inventory. And that is being proposed tonight, an initial seed transfer of money of $150,000 to cover future costs of the vehicles. And that's being summarized here. Also included in here is the purchase of a police vehicle for 16-17. So moving forward with the enterprise funds, this one covers the water fund and the sewer fund. And again, I'll just give you guys highlights of what is being proposed in the budget. Majority of the numbers are consistent to what we presented the last time, with a couple of major adjustments on the capital projects. So the budget assumptions on the water, there is a proposed water rate adjustment for 17-18, consistent with a draft rate study. There is a proposed capital project improvements, the same as what we presented the last time. There are two projects, mainly the Well 1A tank at $85,000 and the water SCADA system at $40,000. Again, we also mentioned the last time that there was some sort of a fund consolidation wherein we eliminated the Fund 403, the recycling, and moved that fund balance into the operating. That is in the amount of about $710,000 of monies being moved from 403 to 401. And the only, most of the expenses in the water is flat, except for the operating expense due to the indirect cost allocation, consistent to all the funds as well. For the sewer fund, we are assuming no sewer rate adjustment included in the 17-18. The proposed capital improvement projects are consistent to what we presented the last time, except for two projects: the St. Joseph Way main replacement at $100,000 and the manhole lateral repair improvement. All those projects are consistent to the draft study that was presented tonight. So whatever projects that we are proposing tonight are consistent projects that have been presented in the draft study earlier this evening. So with that, just wanted to conclude that the proposed 17-18 budget highlights a positive 2017-2018 budget outlook based on current economic projections, a balanced budget maintaining prudent fund balances, and I forgot to mention this is our 9th general fund balanced budget, our expenditures not exceeding total estimated revenues. We also include a 25% contingency reserve and a total general fund reserves at 73%, which is highest in recent years. And again, this budget prioritizes economic development, infrastructure, and community by improving infrastructure, by continuing to invest in significant capital projects, and enhancing service levels by implementing operational improvement and providing transparency in the city government. With that, that ends the presentation for the budget. And I'm open for any questions.
Questions? I'll go this way.
A couple of very brief comments. It's the 9th straight or consecutive year.
Consecutive, yes.
That we've had a balanced budget. I think that's really important to say. And, 73%, that's pretty ridiculous. I dug deep into the budget to see if it was really true. Not that I didn't trust you, Norm, but I really needed to see it in my own eyes. So that's very impressive. And having, reserves, well, at the end of the fiscal year of, a little over $1 million, I think that's a great thing. So I'm really pleased. I mean, we went through the budget process. This is news that we've heard, but this is really good, and I'm glad to see that. I just remember one of the things I said a couple of terms ago was I wanted to get back on the council to see what I could do from a financial perspective. Not that I had anything to do with this. Obviously, it's a team effort here and group effort. But that was really important to me, was to make sure that, because we were in that economic downturn, it wasn't pretty, but to make sure the city could get back on its feet, and we will be successful if we can get some of these economic projects in that will, derive more taxes that we can then benefit and everybody can benefit from. So, hopefully we'll keep our fingers crossed for, the economic development part of this overall plan. But thank you all.
John?
I would just concur with Councilmember Delasso. The fact that we're looking at elevating JP to allow further economic opportunity exploration with our community development director and office within the budget to keep supporting that is very positive. I think it's a nice job.
Mayor?
Well, I think it was mentioned earlier tonight, and I'll agree, this was a rather big packet to wade through. But when I got to packet page 102, the highlights of the 17-18 budget, I actually stayed there a while. I just wanted to look that over a few times. I think I might have drawn a smiley face or two, unlike most of the rest of my notes throughout this. Basically, I'm very pleased with the work that's been put into this. I have a great deal of confidence in the work that you've done, the professionalism and transparency you brought to this budgeting process and to the presentation of it. I think this is about almost the 9th time around for me watching one of these. And I think this was perhaps these series of 3 meetings taken together, as well as the materials you presented with them, I think are one of the clearest and best presentations that I've seen. And I'm very happy with the direction we've managed to get to in this last 9 years. And you've all been a big part of that, so thank you.
Okay, with that, I will open this up for public. You guys going to fight? Come on, George. George.
Well, Council, I'm very upset with this budget because it does not balance. The budget does not balance. You can always make a budget balance if you overestimate future revenues and you leave out or ignore future anticipated expenditures. And this is indicative of what goes on in Cotati. Every year, these budgets are not balanced, and I will explain this in detail. But first, we normally don't have a mid-year review in February. Usually our mid-year reviews are somewhere in April. And that's been a big mistake, and I hope this improves. We get our mid-year reviews back on schedule. But remember how ill-prepared Cotati was back in 2008, 2009? Do you remember how sound the budget was back then? But then Diane Thompson, the city manager, had to call an emergency budget session. We were in emergency. Why were we in emergency? Because we did not have sufficient reserves to handle it. Rohnert Park was in a much better situation than we were in Cotati, and we talked about it often, and the press newspapers talked about it as well. We were in a desperate situation because of bad financial planning. Rohnert Park was able to handle it a few more years. They were able to spread out that reserve. Cotati was in crisis. Remember when Joan Hayes, our finance director, plugged in the number into the budget? Lowe's department store came to us and said, we think that we're going to bring you $1 million in tax revenue each and every year. The council was shaking with excitement. Joan Hayes plugged that $1 million into the budget, and then the money never came. The first year, Lowe's brought in $450,000 in revenue, half of what is expected. Busted the budget again. The next year, $350,000, $375,000. Busted the budget again. These anticipated revenues were unbelievable. Now, please explain to me, we were leasing police cars, now we're buying police cars. We justified leasing them before because we didn't have money. Now we have money. Now we're buying them. Okay, it gets a little confusing. In this budget, you put in anticipated revenues for the California new gas tax. Anybody heard that the gas tax may not go into effect? That there's a whole statewide movement to repeal the gas tax? Please do not put these anticipated revenues of the gas taxes into the budget. Okay? Like you did with Lowe's. Don't do it. Keep it out. 25% reserves is not enough. We saw what happened in 2009. They wanted to blame me for it because I was the bearer of bad news. It's not enough. There's no money in the budget for a city hall replacement. This building, folks, is not going to last you another 30 years. It's not going to last you another 30 years. You're going to have to plan for another building. The police department, our police station, is not going to last another 40 years. You're going to have to budget for another police station well beyond where we're not going to be here. You're going to have to start saving a certain amount of money a year for capital improvements. This is a farce. You can't keep putting lipstick on a pig on this building. This building is inherently dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori?
Just a reminder, I should be cuddled up with Bella by now. Okay. The budget wasn't available on the web, and the only way it was during the whole month of May while you had your meetings was if you went to the one. You never published it, which was a Brown Act violation, I believe. I'm not exactly sure on that. I pointed that out. Of course, you did nothing. The one thing that I saw on so I didn't have a lot of time with 373 pages of other agenda packet to go over the budget a lot. But one thing I did notice is that the budget doesn't have undesignated reserves versus regular reserves. You know what I'm talking about, Nora. And then, and that there was a lot of times when things were put to contracts rather than there was reductions, I think, in public works, but then there was huge raises in contracts. The money is going to the administration of the city, not to projects in the next year. From what I saw, you finished up paying for the downtown improvement plan this past year. This coming year, all you have is the building over here for Letty, Cater Park access, which I'm disabled, I can get there. I don't know what more access you're going to do. And School Street Pathway. School Street Pathway, when I tried to tell you 2-3 years ago that there was a disabled woman 2 houses down from where you were planning to put in the work on the pathway already, you said that the West School Street would take too much work. There's no property lines, there's all that, and that seems not to be budgeted at all. That it's overgrown with trees. They're all mismanaged. It's a big fire ant. There's hardly enough room for one car, and you're wanting to put in a pathway with no. It's going to be way over budget. Let's see what else. West Cotati. Sorry, I need my prompts every once. West Cotati dangerous turn. That there is not a single cent saved up by the city to correct that turn. And it was priority number 3 in 1998. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing none, I will bring it back. So, Norm.
Yes.
You're on the hot seat here.
Okay, so I just want to mention that if you look at our budget, we are very conservative in our projections of revenues. And this is reflected on page 123 of your packet here. If you look at the third column of page 123, the very bottom of that shows adopted budget of last year, which is at $6.2 million. But look at the fourth column, shows estimated current year actuals. We are at $6.4 million. So I just wanted to point that out, that the budget that we adopted and that we continue to adopt still focuses on prudence. And it is reflected based on what you have seen in here, what was adopted last year, and what we are estimating as of June this year, what to receive at the end of the fiscal year. So that summarizes how we address the proposed revenues that we are presenting to the council.
And really quickly, I'll just add too that a lot of the development-related fees, they're impact fees. And so while we might project what we think we will receive in terms of impact fees, they're not spent in the year. They're just projected to be received. And so if they're not received, it doesn't really matter. It's just they don't get received, and we show the impact fees not coming in. And with respect to the non-related development impact fee, the non-impact fees from development, with the substantial reserve, those fees are relatively minor compared to the budget amount. So it's...
And if I may add as well, I think we had also mentioned in the past studies that the 73% that we are achieving reserve, that is even net of the $240,000 contingency funds that we have on the non-departmental. So we do have some excess, money to cover some emergencies, some of the payments for payouts and all that. So this budget covers everything that we could think of that had happened historically and moving forward of what we are anticipating.
Okay. So a couple things. One, leasing vehicles versus buying vehicles. Could you speak to that?
So historically, it kind of depends on what the lease rates are versus, straight purchase. I think during the recession, lease rates were incredibly low, and our available revenue was correspondingly low. So it just made sense at that time. But with any sort of, even as low as the rates were, they're not totally free, right? So when economic times are better and you have the cash on hand, it's just an overall better deal just to buy it cash.
Well, and I think I was reading somewhere, and one of the things that sometimes it's better to lease, sometimes better to buy, but you need to look at both depending upon the situation, is what they said. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. Sometimes it's better to do one or the other. Now, it's not that we have just 25% reserves. We also have the 70.
We have a combined reserve, 73%. Yes.
Combined reserves of 73.
And that is inclusive, that is even netted against the $240,000 that we had reserved under the non-departmental to cover for some of the payouts that we discussed 2 weeks ago.
Okay. And then we're always saving for capital improvements because we have the funds and we put them aside and we save them until we have what we need to do that capital improvement, correct? Which is much of what happens with a lot of the special funds. For instance, the park and lieu funds. You can't just build a park. You have to have enough funds to be able to do whatever it is that you're trying to do, right? Yes? Okay. There was a question about the undesignated reserves versus designated. Can you?
Well, it's up to the council to, I think we discussed this one lightly the last time about designating reserves. So when we designate, we are actually earmarking or encumbering, or another term is restricting this money for a particular project or for a designation of some sort. So given the fact that we had a required reserve already at 25%, that money by resolution cannot be touched, or we are obligated to keep that reserve. Any excess to that gives the council to direct us on how to spend accordingly and appropriately, depending on the vision, the goals of the council as they see forward in the coming fiscal year.
So in terms of, on packet page 121, there's the general operating contingency, which, as Norm said, that's the 25% reserve that's restricted by council resolution. And then the line item right below that called reserve is really in excess of that. That's available for a use that the council may determine in the future.
And so the total between the two is $4.2 million?
Correct.
Correct. Come up,
Would you
Laura.
come to the podium,
Yeah,
please?
so it gets recorded, please. Thank you.
I don't quite all understand it, but it's called a CARF, C-A-R-F?
CAFR.
Yeah, and it has that undesignated and designated.
Correct.
Does that just, you're going to report that later?
Well, a CAFR is a comprehensive annual financial reporting. This is, in a way, more of the budget itself. The reserve is technically just showing how much of the money that is available moving forward in the current year for budget purposes is required by the council, yes.
Now, it's my understanding there are no cuts. We are not making any cuts in Public Works, correct?
No, there's no cuts.
Okay. Is there any change in how we're providing services in Public Works?
No significant changes. There, we have the same number of employees in Public Works, and we have the same contract services.
The contract services are generally for the landscaping?
Yeah, so the major
Right.
contract services are, park and street landscaping and signal maintenance, signal and street light maintenance.
Mm-hmm. And we've always had the signal maintenance, and for a long time, we have had the landscaping.
During the recession.
For a long time.
Yeah, during the recession, the Public Works crews took on the assessment district landscaping maintenance. But aside from that kind of momentary change in landscape maintenance responsibilities, it's basically always been a contractor doing landscaping, and as far as I know about, and same with signal maintenance.
Okay, and I know you're familiar with this, and we've talked about this before, the unfunded liabilities.
Yes, the unfunded liability is also part of this budget. It's actually fully funded in this particular year. And if I mentioned also in the past that the way we have been managing the cash of the city, that we are actually paying lump sum instead of paying monthly. And so that saves us.
And don't we get a break on that when we pay that?
We
lump
do.
sum?
We say about $30,000. It's a one-time saving.
Okay. And the West Katati turn, that none of that will be addressed until we address that whole section, correct? We have to address that whole 116 section, correct?
So it's part of the future capital plan for Highway 116.
Right.
But it's a significant undertaking. Yeah.
Right, because I think that when I think we talked about it in the budget.
Yeah, and I should also add too that improvement, like you'd mentioned earlier about like Park and Lou as an example of a type of impact fee fund where you collect these impact fees over time, and at some point you have enough money to do the project. So the turn on the realignment of West Katati at 116, that is, it was identified in the impact fee program for new development, right? So new developers build things, and they pay a traffic impact fee, and that pays for things such as realigning that road. So when the fees have been collected to the point that we can pay for it, then that's when that project would go.
But that had a really big price tag on it. That's my recollection.
So the overall...
whole overall section that we have to do, and we have to do all at once, is about $10 million. So,
And it's all, I mean, all of the 116 improvements are included in the traffic impact fee program.
correct.
To be collected over time. And that'll take time, and there very well likely could be other revenue sources as time goes on. I mean, development comes along and they contribute some piece to it potentially. Not that that's planned for, but that's, that could accelerate some of the timing of the improvements.
Okay. And what is your thought on, if you're even that far, on what we are going to do as far as a pathway over on the west side?
So that project is is primarily looking at the pathway from down Richardson.
Okay.
We're not talking
To
about
start.
right.
Because there's too many issues. Well, sometimes you have to do things a little bit at a time and then move forward, unfortunately. Let's see, I think I have hit almost everything. You have questions? Just comment, question?
Questions, comment, all mixed up
Sorry.
together. But I think you covered most of it, Madam
Okay,
Mayor.
I was trying to.
But you hit on the use of reserves for projects, how it moves in and out of the budget, and if that should be a concern. Because we've heard that concern a few times. I think it's a perfect time to underline that a little bit. There's two things you don't want to see with that. And I hope somebody will listen. Yes, it is 10 o'clock. We'll get to the next. This is important, actually. You're right about that. But this is important. You really don't want to see those reserves always gone. That's true. The project reserves shouldn't be down low and empty all the time. That's not good. You're not going to be doing any work. But if they're full all the time consistently, you're not doing the intended purpose of that either. What you should see is what you've seen here in recent years. They move in, they accrue, they build buying power, for lack of a better word. Then they're invested in projects for the community, and it goes out. And for a while, that particular reserve, those reserves are going to be low. But that's how it's supposed to work. So I think that's important to underline. It's a good thing to talk about. Unfunded liability, too. One key thing I want to point out, and this would be very good for the whole audience to hear, actually, because I hear a lot of talk about unfunded liabilities, and when we talk about that, usually we're talking about the unfunded liability, the cost in retirements. Madam Mayor, we have some order, please?
Could we please?
You've been talking the whole time. And I'm replying to your concerns, so I'd appreciate your
I
attention.
think it echoes.
So, as I was saying,
I'm just saying it echoes. That's all I'm saying.
thank you, I appreciate your forbearance.
Thank you.
And when we're talking about unfunded liabilities, we're usually talking about employee retirements and benefits. That's the big cost. Everybody agrees about that. And a lot of cities have had concerns and still do. We were talking to some council members from a neighbor city, which I won't name, that have some concerns in the future on that. But I think it's important to point out, I'm glad you guys are here, I wish the press was here, we're not in so bad shape because of the actions we took back in 2009, 2010, and 11 during that point in time. Those cuts that we took and our employees worked with us on, everybody said, oh, they're good, but they won't do anything because you won't get enough third-tier employees quick enough or second-tier employees quick enough to make a difference. Well, guess what? They actually did. So your community is actually not in bad shape that way. Well, we have some expenses coming, but unless the economy turns upside down again, we're in much better shape than probably most of the cities around here. So I think that's good news, and I really wanted to share it. And one last question for the city manager, who will appreciate this, because I know in a previous life you were a city engineer. Would we be having a meeting here if City Hall was a dangerous place for people to assemble? You're smiling. I think I know what the answer is, but I've heard this about 3 times now, that this is a danger. It reminds me a little more, it reminds me a little bit of the sky is falling talk. So I'd like to hear from somebody who's actually trained in this and might know something about this. This is actually a concern for us at this point in time.
So I'm not aware of any danger that this structure poses. I know I've heard reported that the police chief, the prior police chief, I should point out, who has a lot of structural experience, said something like that apparently but
He had structural experience. I understood previously he was a Wankel engine mechanic.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't be sarcastic.
Okay, I see. It was above me, nicely
Yeah.
done. And you made my point,
Yeah.
so that's perfect. I just wanted to underline it. I would agree, who knows, maybe in 40 years, even our nice new police station, we might need to replace it. Hopefully it'll last a little longer than that, because it was certainly well invested in. But I think since that's 40 years out, we have other things to worry about just about now. So I'm not going to worry about that particular one. So again, I'm very pleased with this budget and everything that's been done to it. It's typical when you work on things for a long time and set aside, you don't see the results for a few years. But when it finally all starts coming together, darn if it doesn't start working good. And I'm very pleased to see that.
Okay, I think we need to have a motion to continue because it's 10 o'clock.
So moved.
Second?
On the motion to extend? Okay. Go for it. Okay, thank you.
Council, we have people in the room who have disabilities. We have people in the room who have jobs we have to get to in the morning. Mr. Deloso, I think, gets up earlier than I do to go to work. We've been here for some 3 hours tonight doing the people's work and doing it as best we can. I think it pushes the limit of human endurance, and I think it is punishing at this point to continue this meeting after 10 o'clock tonight. I would advise you to please move this meeting, adjourn this meeting to a time and place certain in the future. I would suggest next Tuesday night at 6 o'clock to resume this meeting, and I would be happy to also recommend us coming in Saturday morning and continue this meeting. I think it's punishing to go any further tonight with the amount of items still on the agenda to be covered.
Thank you. Yes, Lori?
As that person with disabilities, I am getting to my limit. I am feeling better than usual tonight, but 3 hours is getting too much for my disabilities, and this is your fault. This is your planning, the agenda items. No, Mr. Moore, it is not our fault, as you like to say every time.
I never once said that.
Yes, you did.
It's a lie.
Let her finish, please.
I've just been called a liar. Thank you.
I said,
you should have planned evenly. There was 3 weeks in between this and the last one. Now realize this is the full end of the fiscal year and all that, but this should have been way planned before, that you have evenly spaced agendas. Thank you.
thank you. So we have, I'll close public comment. We have a motion and a second. So,
I'm ready to go beyond human endurance, yes.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Got it? Okay. So, John, do you have comments?
No, you guys have covered them all.
Okay. Mr.
I do, a couple items.
Okay, all right.
I think this budget shows a lot of adaptability, and I think, this city has been pretty darn good in leveraging funds over the years, and we're continuing to do that, so we're getting more bang for our buck. It's funny, George, that I'm not trying to get in a conversation with you, this is not a personal attack, but you always say how, this budget's a farce, it's a lie, yet at the end of every fiscal year, we get audited by professional auditors that have very strict standards, and every year they say, indeed, at the end of your fiscal year, you came out with a balanced budget. So I don't know what it's going to take to have some people believe that we actually do have balanced budgets. This is not a conversation at this point. This is not a conversation. I'm going to do my homework and find out each year what kind of revenue, whatever I can find on public process, that Lowe's has generated in the form of tax. The first year they were here was not a full fiscal year, so we know that, those projections won't meet. And also, again, in this budget, it was pointed out at the budget hearings, again, tonight in the slideshow, that there are, I believe, roof repairs planned for this building, which is structural in nature.
Next door.
In school.
those,
Civic Center.
Those buildings.
yeah, well, they're.
Don't point that way.
That's where they're at. That's the park. So, but,
I'm just waiting for everybody. So, and it's funny to keep going back 9 years, 10 years, and it's like, well, you know, this was going to be a failure, you did this, but a lot of things that were put in place 9 or 10 years ago, which I was not a part of necessarily, have proved to be beneficial. Mark brought up, Vice Mayor Lehman brought up the one about the tiered employee rate system, and I think that's an excellent one. There's others, examples. I'm just going to leave it at that for now because of the hour, and we will make some decision, I guess, on the rest of this evening's agenda. Thanks.
okay, I'll be brief. Thank you, Norm. This process has been excellent. I appreciate all the work you've put into it. I appreciate that the new system has helped along with getting us the information on, you know, actuals versus budget, because that's for years been something that's been a little hidden. So I really appreciate that. And I'm sure that it's been helpful to the department heads to be able to not only manage their departments better, but to be able to budget for the future. The one thing that I'll touch on that I think no one's touched on yet is I'm happy to see the funds in there for road improvements. I wish that it was more, but I get that we can, you know, have to be prudent about how we spend that. But I'm glad to see after last year that we're able to spend another $600,000 on road improvements. So with that, what would you all like to do?
I'd like to move to adopt a resolution approving the City of Cotati budget for fiscal year 2017-18.
And I'm sorry, real quick, before that motion is seconded, the resolution on page 104 has, it is hereby certified twice. It's just a
typo.
Yeah, it was a typo. So the first one, delete the first one. It's the second one that has by a following vote to wit, which is.
Okay, with that adjustment and correction?
Yeah.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
So that would be a 4-0 vote,
May I ask staff a question on the rest of the agenda, if I may?
I suppose.
Okay, well, with that, I'll take advantage of it. So out of items C, D, and E, are any of those timely that need to have some kind of action taken on them this evening?
So with respect to item D, we do, because we have a July 1
correct
deadline on that one. And then for E, it's a, well, the sooner we get it going, the better on the RFP. It just delays it.
Right.
I mean, it's not, you know, I would recommend that we do that one. And then C, it's one that we want to get adopted. I don't, Norm will probably kick me under the chair for this one, but.
And I'm not trying to put you under the bus. I'm just pushing under the bus. I'm just thinking in terms of, you know, the process for this evening. If there's something that could be put off for 2 weeks to the next regularly scheduled meeting, I'm just asking that question of staff.
So I think of those three, C is probably the lowest priority tonight, and then we could.
I don't think Norm's agreeing with
Norm
you.
may not agree, but, and then 11, 12, you know, may be deferred to, and they're just a critical item. So there's things we can do to shorten up the agenda.
Okay.
If needed.
Okay, so let's move onward. Do you want to continue any of those items, or are you okay giving it a shot?
Well, I'm pretty clear that item D was probably the most time sensitive of the next three, and item E has some importance from the timeliness level, and I would have thought that item C could be postponed, delayed, whatever's a softer word to use. So
Continued, I believe.
And so I'm just throwing that out to council and to the mayor of how we want to approach the rest of these three items for this evening.
And I would just offer a suggestion that maybe we do item D and then E and then get to C, just see where we are after E.
I was going to just suggest that.
Yeah. And hopefully if we have time, we can get to C.
Okay.
If it's
Well, and item D is not really new information, it's just
No,
consolidation
it's the same,
of the information.
well, and we do the same
Right.
every year. Okay, so we'll do D first. Sorry, Norm.
I think we gave you enough kudos on the previous items, so it'll hold you for a little while.
Mayor, members of the council, Craig Scott, let me get that PowerPoint up and running. Yes. Just to note that the agenda item has the annual engineer's report attached to it. There were some changes to that, typos, so that the revised report is on your dais there in front of you. Okay, and it's basically concerning one issue, the timing when that money was moved out of the reserves and into the general plan, but I'll explain that, into the general fund, rather. Okay, so this is the annual process that is required from the Landscape and Lighting Act to so that we can assess the 10 landscape and lighting districts within the city boundaries to help cover the landscape maintenance costs, any improvements to the landscaping, and then lights maintenance as well. There are, like as I said, 10 existing landscape and lighting districts, and they were formed between 1989 and 2003. This year, concurrently with this process, the city is intending to consolidate the 10 districts into one district with 10 zones, and the 10 zones would have their current names and be managed individually with their budgets and the reserves and so forth. This is a three-step process. We initially came before council on February 14th to start the process by directing the city engineer, me, to prepare the engineer's report. The preliminary engineer's report is now complete, and so what we're asking you tonight is to accept that preliminary report and to adopt a resolution with the intent to assess and collect the fees, levy the assessments, rather, and the intention to consolidate the districts, and also to then set the public hearing. And following this meeting, we would put a notice in the paper, and which would let people know when the public hearing is set for, and we'd go from there. Okay, so a note on the consolidation. I kind of touched on it briefly. Okay, the budgets will be managed individually still in a single, however, there's going to be anticipated savings in costs to administer this process every year. And it's also easier to understand because it's all in one report, and then each district, which will be called zones, will have their own section in the report. So there's not 10 different reports that we're juggling around trying to find what we're looking for. It's just the one report. It's a lot better organized. Okay, so here are the 10 zones, and we're going to introduce the numbering system. So in a report, we'll refer to them by a number, and can always come back to their name if need be. The next diagram is something we generated new this year. It's just one graphic showing where all the zones are located.
That's helpful.
Yeah. So already we're seeing some streamlining here. What's required each year, and you have to see this from the perspective of the property that's being assessed, is what did you do for me this year? So we have to review what efforts the city conducted this past year, where their money went, including just maintenance activities and any improvements that are above and beyond, that you would save up for and, use the reserves to help offset those costs, such as landscaping. The plants, they mature, they die, and so major replantings have to happen occasionally, as well as fences get broken and they need to be repaired. This isn't something that happens every year, but periodically. So in zones, in 7 of the zones, 1, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, in fiscal year 15-16, we had, they were part of the citywide energy efficiency program where the high-pressure sodium light fixtures were replaced with LEDs. So these costs were assessed to those, the respective costs that were within that specific zone were then charged to that zone. We did landscape and replanting and irrigation repair in zones 2 and 8. So this is Quail Hollow, which is part of the Myrtle landscaping project. Much of that was in just city of right-of-way. There's just about 17% or so of that project was in Quail Hollow. So that 17% was charged to that zone. And the reserves were able to pay for those with no general fund subsidy. And then Zone 8 is Park Meadows. And there's quite a bit of landscaping renewal in there, and new mulch was put in there, as well as a major repair to the split rail fence. The LED cost, and that's the red line on the version in front of you, is initially we thought that those charges for that 15-16 project were going to be charged to these zones in 17-18, and we were able to do that in 16-17, just to get it closer to when those improvements happened. So that was a better way to go. Okay, so the slide just shows these capital improvement costs, if you will, not the routine maintenance costs, but what these sort of unusual improvement costs were per zone. So you've got the LED switch out, as well as the landscape in Quail Hollow and Park Meadows. Okay, and again, all of these total improvement costs were able to come out of their reserves, the inadequate reserves. Okay, planned improvements for 17-18. We just have the one zone, Park Meadows, where it's part of the city, the lighting project. There are 6 lights that are within the Park Meadows landscape and lighting district along the pathway, and I do have the improvement plans attached here. In fact, we could go look at those now. We'd have to get out. It's on a PDF. So these are light standards. They're about $5,000 per light, and so that's $30,000 to come from the zone's reserves in 17-18, and then the zone is proposed to be charged electrical costs going forward for those lights. So the engineer's report is available at the city clerk's office for review, and these plans are also there, as well as being on the city's website. Okay, so then we're moving on back to the PowerPoint with there are 4 zones that have inflationary adjustments, and we don't have to do that every year, but how this works is from the date the district was initiated to today, that is the maximum assessment. If we stay within that maximum assessment, then we do not have to have a protest ballot. And so it's good to establish what that number is. What we are proposing this year is to increase 3 of the zones by just an annual not all of the years, or not to max it out, but if you look at year over year, it's 4.1%. And what we did was to look at the health of their reserves and of their budgets and say, just try to keep up with the escalating costs of materials and labor and so forth. So those ones are Garden Gate, Park Meadows, and Altman Acres. And you can see on this slide, like for example, Garden Gate would go from $195.56 to $203.58, for example, just pulling one out of the three. Okay, so the total assessment per the new zones would be shown on this chart here, just to get an idea what the city collects each year, individually and together. Okay, and we are keeping track of the reserves, and so this slide here shows the reserves for each of the zones on July 1st and what the projected reserve balance is at the end. So you can see Quail Hollow is at $212, for example. It did spend down, we did spend down reserves on the Myrtle Landscape project, and so you can see how gradually, slowly, it would start recovering with over $100 added back in each year. And you can see you could just see the general health of the zones. With Park Meadows, you can see it has $24,763 in there, and a combination of the year's revenues and the $30,000 going out for the light project. It'll be taken down to $680 and so forth. Okay, so we come back once more to council at the public hearing where you consider adopting the, you'd approve the consolidating the zones and approving the engineer's report and approving the assessment and collection of the assessments. With that, I'd be happy to address any questions you might have.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one question for staff. And this goes back to when Mr. Ovid was our city manager a few times. We dealt with Zone 6, Oak Knoll. We have some plantings there that have had some trouble surviving, thriving. We've replaced them a few times, and I noticed just the other day walking, not a significant amount, but a few of them in the lower end are dead again, or just about dead. And so I wanted to ask, I see we have a regular weekly cleanup, we have monthly pruning, weeding, and we have a very well thought out system of doing this. Anywhere in their schedule, is there a checkoff for whoever's doing this work to check the health of the existing plantings and to note if something needs replacing? Because it occurs to me, we run into this a lot. I bring it up because the first time this was brought up to us, it was a resident of Oak Knoll who said, you know, I don't mind the tax that much. I don't mind paying. I just want it to look nice, which seems reasonable to me.
I think we're going to see the benefit of having a single engineer's report because it's a quick reference to see what the reserve balance is. And when we get input like that from the public, as well as our drive-bys, we'd be able to say, oh yeah, it can afford, this zone can afford those improvements. And we would then, at an administrative level, just go out and buy some plants and make those improvements and then report on it.
So there's a structure in place that will make sure somebody will note that at some point within the quarter, say, it's like, whoops, that looks like that needs doing. We have the reserve. They'll get maintained?
Yes. I'm encouraging our public works staff to, do a reconnaissance of these zones, at least, a couple times a year to figure out how they're doing.
I think that would be really helpful. I think it'd be good news if we could get out, and have a process that picks that up so it doesn't go 6 months or somebody doesn't spend most of a year with most of the city plannings dead and then get their tax bill, which would be an unfortunate framing of things. So I would encourage that, and that sounds like a good answer. Thank you. Mr. Scott?
Madam Mayor, if I may?
Yes.
To Councilman Lammon's concern, going by Park Meadows all the time and seeing the improvements there are significant and aesthetically pleasing. And so they have had the opportunity to go to some of these districts and correct and fix things.
Park Meadows is?
McGinnis.
Park Meadows is in front of the Vets building.
Right.
Yeah, or near there.
Do you have questions? Okay, that's all the questions. Public comment? George, do you have any public comment? No? I'll close public comment, and
So I'd like to say long time coming. I think I've been griping about getting one big district together, so thank you for that. And not since then, no. But I'd like to move to adopt a resolution of intent to consolidate the landscape and lighting maintenance districts, levy and collect annual assessments, approve the preliminary engineer's report, and set the time and date of the public hearing for the proposed consolidated Cotati Landscaping and Lighting Assessment District for fiscal year 2017-18.
have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
With that, we can let's move to item E.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So this is the draft request for proposals for development of the former Caltrans St. Joseph's Park and Ride lot. And just real briefly, this, as you know, was a former Caltrans-owned property. Through some very good negotiations with, at the time, it was Mayor Landman and the city manager and, myself in the public works role at that time. It was a good team effort, as well as some of our legislators that gave assistance in that process. We were able to do what was told to us was the impossible, which was get a piece of Caltrans property and essentially get it surplus to the city. There's a surplus process, but we found another process that got it to us without calling it surplus, because surplus never happens. So they, through this replacement agreement, which is attached to the staff report, that was the contractual mechanism that transferred the property to the city. And the basic deal is that we get the property at no cost, and Caltrans requires us to build park and ride spaces in the locations that Caltrans had designated for us to replace them in. And that includes a minimum of 30 spots on site in Cotati, and then the remainder of the spots that Caltrans wanted for their HOV system was up at the Airport Boulevard. This is existing Caltrans property that it would get built on, and then also Petaluma Boulevard South, which is an oversubscribed existing park and ride lot just south of the river. And the time is, I think the time is upon us to put an RFP out on that property to try to encourage development on that site. It's a 2-acre lot, and it's in the downtown specific plan area. I think as council has been pushing regularly and often to move development forward on the Northern Gateway, and this is a piece of property that is a linchpin to that development area in terms of both being the entryway. It's one of the most highly visible properties, both from Highway 101 and also 116. And as in our strategic planning meetings, as council has also prioritized, lodging development as being high priority for a variety of reasons. It was this RFP, this draft RFP before you tonight is written to try to encourage that type of development. And there's some adjoining properties that are also for sale or otherwise available potentially that are shown in this draft RFP. And while they're private properties, we don't control them. We, in this draft RFP, would be directing potential proposers to contact those property owners to see if they can aggregate a larger deal than just the city-owned property. But at the base level, city-owned property is all they need to develop, but if they can develop something more in terms of the scoring, they get bonus points for aggregating properties. And in the draft RFP, under the selection procedure, this is back at page 307, you can see the selection procedure criteria, and they include kind of the general stuff, the responsiveness to the requirements, the qualifications, and financial ability to successfully complete the development, what the quality of the proposed development is, time required, ability to partner with adjacent properties. That's, again, able to partner with some private properties. Long-term value to the city, and if the development's requesting any incentives or the timing of the incentives, that's one of the criteria. And ability to assist with some of this, as I mentioned earlier, replacement spots off-site. And I will just conclude with saying that we do also attach a draft development agreement. So the terms of that development agreement, at least as we see them, are provided for any proposers. And one of the things we ask for is $300,000 up front. It's sort of good faith money. And the intent of that $300,000 is to move the offsite replacement facility design forward with those funds, and then that would be credited towards any eventual sale of the property. And so the property would have to be sold at fair market value or better to not be considered a gift of public funds. So that's kind of the base sale level, is whatever the appraised fair market value is of the property. And in terms of process, they would have to submit, at least as it's written now, a letter of intent to propose by the end of the month, and then the actual proposals will be due like a month after that. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
How locked into those time periods are we?
In terms of the time to propose? So we're not. Those are flexible.
Okay. So we don't necessarily want to lose any potential suitors.
Right.
Okay.
Right. The intent, hopefully someone between now, because this would be turned around after this meeting and be put out before the end of the week. The intent is by the end of the month, and we'll distribute it widely. By the end of the month, they really just need to give us a letter saying, yeah, we're interested, we want to propose. That's all. And then it gives them an opportunity to meet with us and discuss any questions they have, and then a whole other month after that to kind of put things together. And if we hear back from people that it's just not enough time or whatever, then we do have the option of extending it.
Readdressing it.
Yeah.
You partially answered the one thing I wanted to add. Looking at the ranking measures we have, you do have aggregating property on there. I wondered if it would be worth adding to that, particularly extra points for aggregating property or developing neighboring sites with complementary entertainment-based projects. In other words, something that actually fits really well with the lifestyle branded hotel you're talking about would carry more weight probably for us and provide more benefit than just a hotel and a tire store next to it. Obviously, that's more development, but I don't know if it's worth mentioning, but I think that's the goal. So that's the only direction I have. I think it's well thought out, clear, and we'll see what sort of response and what ultimately a timeline might look like.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I would in part disagree with the Vice Mayor on that one. I would rather leave it wide open and let the proposals come in. I think after they meet with staff, there'll be some direction. If you're talking about putting this in the letter, this direction of, giving them some ideas?
No, we have some, if you look at the last page, 307.
Right, that list.
The selection procedure, and it does say ability to partner with adjacent properties. And there should be some wording that also we're looking for complementary development. I think you use complementary and entertainment-based properties on page 304.
Right.
And I just wanted to add that in there just to make it clear that derives even more value. But I'm not looking to limit anything. I agree with you.
Good.
No, I want to leave it wide open.
Um,
And hope for the best.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So my one question, though, is do the replacement facilities, the park and ride in Santa Rosa and Petaluma, I'm assuming that has to happen first and be completed before this moves beyond that stage?
No, so there's some options. And I think the options that any developer would take, so we gave it some thought when we were negotiating with Caltrans, because we expect that you'd have the chicken and the egg kind of conundrum if you had to build them before the site got developed. So one of the options available to the city is to take the sale proceeds and put it in an escrow account that's available to Caltrans. And then, as far as Caltrans is concerned, they release the property. So they have on the deed, they have, and I'm forgetting the term that they use, but they're having, in the deed, they have a hold on it, just basically saying that, we'll release this fully to, we'll take this
Contingency?
encumbrance, thank you, yeah, that's probably the closest to the right term. We'll remove this encumbrance on the property once the fair market value for the property is funded in escrow. And so once that happens, then it just sets a time period for once the site gets actually physically disturbed with dirt moving, then you have like another year after that to replace the facilities.
Oh.
So there's some timing built into that with the expectation that we wouldn't have all the construction dollars at the same time that we sell the property.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
That's it? Okay. Public comment? Yes, Lori.
I noticed Damien's report was very well, not noticing that you want to put a hotel in there. And it's in his report. Mark Lamon did bring it up. That is the absolute horrible place for the park and ride lot is an absolute horrible place for a hotel. I'm great for a hotel in Cotati, but not there. When Damien and I 4 years ago actually got along, I had almost been hit by going to the bus stop by St. Joseph Way. And he worked with Caltrans and PG&E because of the lights, Sonoma County Transit, and Golden Gate Transit. Sonoma County Transit, because of the structure of how that is, a right-hand only lane into the bus stop area at St. Joseph Way, they moved the bus stop for safety reasons back over to where Backdoor Records was, and it's been there for 4 years. I consider it my bus stop because I got it moved. Golden Gate Transit continued it using that stop, and this new Sonoma County Transit stop, only Golden Gate Transit stops there, not Sonoma County Transit. They stop where Sonoma County Transit was. So there's safety issues in the beginning just going around. There's no room for buses to go through. If you go down Old Redwood Highway, you're going over into a right-hand only turn lane to go into St. Joseph. The street structure isn't there. And I mean, I've been talking bus stops for years now. And that's part of the reason why, because I almost got hit. And now you want to put a hotel in another safe, I mean, a hotel was great in Kentucky, but not there. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. George?
Council, I don't know how you're going to pull this off. That property's been encumbered by high weeds and has been a fire danger for years. It's been pretty obvious to the community. You don't care about that property. We've got homeless living out on that property. It's an eyesore. We've got property all around the freeway of on-ramps and off-ramps on the west side, on the east side, that are fire dangers and a visual blight on this community. Now you're going to try to buy this property and you're going to try to resell it. I hope you give it a facelift, because there was a complaint filed today with the Rancho Adobe Fire District that these properties are blighted and they're fire dangers. You know, and now we're looking at going through this process and this deal. You know, it really kind of, it boggles the mind. It boggles the mind. You can't take care of what we have in town, and you worry about these assessment districts and things looking nice, but right down in town in front of thousands of car trips a day, it looks like hell, fire danger, and now you're looking at, you know, purchasing this property and putting money into escrow and putting it back on the market. I mean, you've got to realize that developers are not stupid. They know Cotati. They've talked to other developers. They've talked to Thiessen. They've talked to Monahan. They've talked to all these people. It's a nightmare to try to get a project going in this town. They've talked to Oliver's. It's been in the press. You know, and now you guys want to engage in this lunacy? You know, I mean, you're not good at this. You're not good at managing properties and getting commercial development going. Look what happened out at Lowe's and Cotati Colleges, a complete fiasco.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else wishing to speak? Seeing none, I'll bring this back.
We've reviewed and we've provided comments. I think that was the action to be taken here.
Yes? Do you have the direction you need? Do you need anything else from us?
No, just review and provide comments, and then we'll release this RFP later this week.
All right, then.
Look forward to it.
Yep.
All right.
Okay. So
I would like to ask the mayor, is there any way we could move that item C to our next meeting without looking at Norm? Don't make eye contact.
okay, well, we have a motion and a second. So, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right.
I'll vote no, just for the shock of it.
All right. Sorry, Norm.
Just for the record.
That's right.
I
We'll
got your
put it
back,
way
Norm.
up on the top, okay?
I'm going to hear about that tomorrow. Thanks.
I'm sure.
We were really happy with the budget.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, we
Two out of
like
three.
the budget.
It's good.
Okay, so let's see where we at then. We are at city manager's report.
So now that we've freed up a lot of time, I can get into my full report. So, I'm just joking.
Make it snappy, please.
Yeah. All right, so Officer Gallo, you might know, is on the Project Graduation Board of Directors for the Rancho Cotati High School. And so she's a law enforcement representative, and she attended Project Grad. She was there all night. And our K-9 team also participated in the screening at the beginning of the event. And so I just don't know if everyone was fully aware that we have staff that are involved in that. So anyway, just thought I'd say that. And so on the topic of Project Graduation, I also wanted to report out that I spoke to the president of Project Graduation, and she reported to me happily that the combination of the outpouring of community support and the restitution from the family of the woman that was charged with the embezzlement has provided adequate funding for multiple years for that event. So they're in pretty good shape financially now. So as a result, she wanted me to pass along to the council her sincere thanks for the offer of support from the city, but she said that she didn't need it and it was returned to the city. So, but anyway, she was very grateful and happy that the council offered that. But that's the resolution of that discussion. Just wanted to let you know. Today there was what's referred to as a site event. It's a combined intensive traffic enforcement event, which results in a whole bunch of cops coming here, and we had 11 motorcycle cops and 2 marked patrol vehicles. And the agencies that were here, obviously Cotati was here, Santa Rosa, CHP, and Runner Park, and they issued 67 moving violations, 7 warnings, and 1 vehicle was impounded. So busy morning. The water quality report for 2016 was completed, has gone to the printers to be mailed out, so all of our water customers will see those in the next 2 weeks. That's the annual thing that was done. We had a lot of water quality monitoring, as is annually the case. that is summarized in that report. And as the mayor pointed out earlier in the evening, the 37th Annual Cotati Jazz Festival is this Saturday, June 17th, from noon to 6 p.m. in La Plaza Park. This is put on by the Chamber, and this year's event will feature 4 bands and will offer something for everyone: crafts, food, beer, and wine. And it's free, as I think everyone knows. But if the Chamber is also looking for volunteers, if anyone's interested in volunteering for that event this weekend, call the Chamber up, and they would be happy to assign you to a volunteer task. And then just some rec stuff. We held last week our Spanish immersion summer camp. We had 12 students. These are 4 to 6 years old. They were able to learn in Spanish practice Spanish vocabulary through song, dance, and play, and had a great week. We had the Moana Theater Camp. We had 22 students, and it was a full house. There was a lot of people around. If any of you came by City Hall when they were doing those recitals, it was packed. And last Friday night, we had our first summer movie in the park with the movie Sing, and that was also packed. Ashley and I were debating how many people were there, but the park was pretty full. We had, 250, 300 people. It was pretty full. And yes. So our next movie in the park is July 14th, where Moana is going to be showed, and then August 1st will be the Lego Batman movie, which will be our second annual National Night Out event. And actually in Sing, we were doing popcorn. The first time we did popcorn. We ran out of popcorn right away, so we're going to have to stock up for more of that next time. And maybe have some more options as we kind of evolve the Movies in the Park program. And as everyone knows, too, July 8th is the 25th Annual Cotati Kids Day Parade and Festival. This year's theme is Cotati Celebrates Culture. And everyone's invited for a free pancake breakfast from 7 to 10 a.m. at Church of the Oaks. Then we have the parade and the festival in La Plaza Park. We have live entertainment, a rock wall, pony rides, face painting, bounce, house, and many more food, crafts, and activity vendors. And also, the county fair is setting up a fairly large thing. So next council meeting, you'll be seeing requests to close part of La Plaza Street for that event because they need a lot of space to set up sort of a mini fair. So that's going to be going on this year. And we have, as reported before, we have the ongoing free lunch program offered in the community center Monday through Friday, 12 to 12:30 for any child 18 and under. It's available all summer. And no proof of income is required. And we're also still taking summer camp registrations, and we're looking for counselor and training people. We have Cotati Camp, Lacrosse Camp, 2 Lego camps, soccer camp, and the Moana Gymnastics Camp. Moana seems to be a real theme this year.
Yes.
So there you have it. If you have, we also have reduced rates for soccer camp and Camp Cotati. So for more information, contact our rec department. And I'll just stop. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Questions? No? Okay. Thank you. Let's see. City Council reports.
I will be going to the REMIF meeting on Thursday, provided I get well.
Okay.
And so I'll have something to report back at the next meeting. And then.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
Given the hour, I'll skip most of them, but there's one I want to share. It's kind of a good report. It's a little different. Went to meet a friend for a cup of coffee here in town at Pete's the other day in the morning. And as we finished it up, we had to go up. So we walked across the street to look at all the new construction to see how the center was doing there. And while we were standing there looking at this, we saw a family come from downtown on the far side of the street, this side of the street closest to Highway 101, a young couple, another neighbor or family member, young woman. The woman was carrying a newborn, and I assume the husband was pushing a stroller with a very young child. They were coming up the street, and they were heading back to the neighborhood behind Pete's. So we wound up striking up a conversation and got to ask them, okay, is this working for your neighborhood? Are you pleased to see this? Is this an improvement for you? And I thought it would be worth mentioning. They live here. They've been here a long time. They're very pleased to see this. They like the way it looks. The only ding we got was this. They said it would have been nice to have somewhere to sit along that nice curved part. And that's when I told them, well, there actually is a bench coming. So I want staff to know you got full marks for that, and at least that family likes the ability to get out, walk out on a nice day, and go downtown and other places in the town. So that was one of the goals, and I was pleased to see it actually happening. So I did want to share that with the council.
Okay, well, I'll be quick. We had our first Sigma meeting. It was pretty painless. The most media's thing that happened was the chair and vice chair. And so Supervisor Hopkins was the chair, and Tom, and I always massacre his last name, from the city of Santa Rosa, Schwedhelm, he was made the vice chair. So that was the biggest thing, and we look forward to working on the advisory group at our next meeting. So basically, the meetings are going to be every other month, so that was good. I attended Health Action quarterly meeting, nothing earth-shattering there to report. And then I attended the spring ABAG general meeting in San Francisco, and the only thing there was there's still a lot of turmoil with the consolidation between ABAG and MTC, and there's still a whole lot of untrusting souls. So that's, I think, going to take a little bit of time of healing, and for everybody to accept that. But with that, I will.
Because of the late hour, I'll pass, but I can report out. It'll be 2 Ag and Open Space meetings. I can just report out next time.
Okay. So with that, public comment on non-action agenda items. George.
I'd like to recommend for a future agenda item, or maybe the city manager's report, what the status is on this research that we are going to get our own public cable channel for Cotati, a public service channel like Rohnert Park's Public Channel 26. City manager has promised a couple times now he's going to get back to us. Folks, this is not rocket science. You can go to Comcast and the management and try to figure this out. It's very important to our community. I'm still hopeful that Damien's going to make good on his promise to report back on this. I've been waiting diligently at these city council meetings and his reports for that. The other thing I'd like you to set on the agenda is what's going to happen with our weed abatement program. We are starting the weed abatement season, the high weed season right now. Evidently, there's no money in the budget for weed abatement. It never has been over the last few years. You guys have completely delegated that responsibility over the Rancho Adobe. They say that's not their responsibility. You have a weed abatement ordinance. Nobody knows what to do about it. Then also, going forward about budgets, I'd like to see you put on the agenda, maybe bring in somebody independent that will come in and try to explain to the council. It may cost you a little something, but explain to the council that when an auditor comes in, the auditor is not looking to see whether you have an honest budget or a dishonest budget. They're looking to see whether the budget balances and the numbers make sense. But they're not politicians. They're not planners. They're not looking forward to the future on what the city needs. They're looking at it as an auditor. Had you been to any business, taken any business courses, you would have noticed that. There's a difference between a balanced budget and an honest budget. And I'm willing to have a conversation with any of you at any time about this in the future. That's what's missing here. And not to take anything away from Norm. Norm is a hired employee, and he's a professional, but he takes orders. He takes orders just like Joan Hayes took orders from Diane Thompson. And we got into a whole lot of trouble when that happened. So we can, you might want to put this on the agenda. Bring in a financial advisor who's going to talk straight, who does not have a political agenda. And maybe we need to put on the agenda also why this building is not earthquake retrofit, what are the real dangers that Police Chief Robert Stewart talked about, that it is dangerous, it is very old, and we have never budgeted any money aside to earthquake retrofit this building. It's a clear and present danger to everybody who works in this building and who comes here to participate. And I don't want this anything bad to happen on our watch, and we need a report. And didn't we just put on a $200,000 roof on this building? And what are we talking about putting another roof on it? We just put a $200,000 roof on the building. So, I mean, we need to look at this as an agenda item. And I ask you, please don't put a new roof on the building until the building is earthquake retrofit. You'll have to do it over again. Thank you.
Thank you. Any?
Madam Mayor, none of those non-action agenda items.
Sorry. Again, on the agenda item, he's right on weed abatement. I know the story from Frank Triner, what happened on weed abatement. It is in the city code. That is the city's responsibility. What happened is Diane Thompson took all the weed abatement files, brought them over to Frank Triner, put them on his desk and says, this is your responsibility now. And we haven't had a weed abatement program since. I had next door weeds up to 5 feet high next to that telephone pole, temporary telephone. I had to call CAL FIRE to have it dealt with because you guys would not deal with it. You need to be taking your responsibilities for weed abatement. Lastly, again, this whole thing with having your agenda items managed better. I'm not doing well now, an hour later, of keeping things going. I wanted to wait, and I want to fully participate in whole meetings, but I can't do that if they're going to 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. There was plenty of time this month to do it properly. Lastly, sorry, one more thing. I do not appreciate being called a liar. Check the tapes from about a month ago, Mr. Moore. You did say that.
So, Lori, how is this related to a non-action agenda item? Which item are you speaking on the agenda? It's not
future agenda on ethics, on reviewing the. I'm tired. I can't say things right. But yes, you're trying to limit my speech. Which
no, but this
but no,
item,
you are.
This
you
item
are.
is
You are. He called me a liar, and you allowed it. Excuse me.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing none. Damien, do you have any information regarding the weed abatement? This keeps coming up over and over again. If you could, it's late, but I think it's important.
Sure. I mean, we can't really get into a long discussion because
Right.
it's an agendized item.
Right.
But I mean, I can just say that it's Rancho Adobe's responsibility.
Okay. So, with that, any information received after the agenda? Seeing none, then I will call this meeting adjourned at 11:05. Thank you all. Thank you.